Andy was my older brother. Everybody loved him. We did have a great relationship growing up. I was 10 and Andy had just turned 16 when my dad passed away. That was very hard. Andy was there and was ready to take on anything he needed to take on as the man of the house. And he made sure me and my mom were both very well taken care of. Andy always wanted to be a police officer for as long as I can remember.
I worked many years with Andy Kimbrell on night shift and through the different assignments. And he was the nicest, positive attitude, happy, eager, every definition that you could think of as a good friend, a good police officer, that would fit him to a T.
When Andy came to work for the Vestavia Hills Police Department in October of 2002, he was assigned to my shift. When you describe a police officer as to serve and protect, that's exactly what he did. Always wanting to do things for other people. A real happy, positive guy.
Andy and Dawn were high school sweethearts. Him and Dawn had a great relationship. You could just feel the love between them when you were around them. Dated for years before they got married. They were, beyond excited to welcome a child, and especially a little girl. They were thrilled to be parents.
He was the happiest he could ever be was when him and his wife had the baby.
I would say that it was a dream come true for him. And then subsequently, there were some medical conditions and medical issues that took a turn, and tragically, his wife passed. To say that his world stopped would be an absolute understatement.
Dawn passed away shortly after their daughter was born. He struggled. I'm sure, having a new baby was a lot for him, and then, shortly losing his wife was, a whirlwind for him at the time, and he was never the same.
Watching one of your own officers go through what he had to go through was very traumatic for all of us.
But, just like he did when my father passed away, he really just stepped up and did what he needed to do, and was a great father to Emma. We always hoped that Andy would find just happiness again, just genuine happiness. He met Stephanie at a school carnival. Her son was the same age as Andy's daughter, and so they were kind of at the same stage in life. I felt like, they would be a good match for each other. When they were together, you could tell they were enjoying each other's company, and, there was an attraction there, and you could definitely see that as well. Andy would be kind of silly and just very affectionate. It was nice to see Andy happy. Stephanie, her and I, we would go out to lunch occasionally. I always wanted a sister-in-law, to be able to be close to, and I wanted to get to know her. I wanted to be a part of their lives. She was very quiet. She didn't really talk about, her family or about her past, what her background was, or any, personal details about herself. I remember not being completely comfortable to ask her those things because she wasn't sharing those things with me automatically. Her background was definitely a mystery, and it does make you wonder, if there was more to this story than we know. One day, My mom came to me and said, I think Andy got married. And I, of course, was very caught off guard. And I said, well, what do you mean? And she said, well, he showed me this piece of paper and it looked like a marriage certificate. And I said, surely not. I said, surely he would have told us. I was a little bit shocked and, obviously hurt by, the fact that he had gone off and gotten married and didn't, tell us before or even after. Those are things you tell your family. And if you're not telling your family those things, there's a reason you're not telling them. It felt wrong. And, it made me wonder whose idea was this. I think there was some manipulation going on. After they had gotten married, you could notice some problems. They would seem to be arguing quite a bit. Stephanie definitely had a temper. I just remember thinking, something's not quite right. Andy didn't really go into a lot of details, but he definitely struggled. Kind of his whole world had been rocked at the point. She was very manipulative. I feel like she did things, to deliberately get a rise out of Andy. Stephanie absolutely knew how to press Andy's buttons. Her behavior definitely felt kind of game-ish, for lack of better words. And then, so I definitely think that was kind of her lifestyle. There were instances where their arguments got out of control and got physical. There was one instance she threw Andy's belongings off the balcony of their apartment. They lived in a very, busy apartment at this point. So she had to know that other people were going to see it. And she may have very well done it to embarrass him. That's humiliating. When Andy and Stephanie would have arguments, Andy would go over to my mom's house. That was his escape, to get away and kind of remove himself from the situation. Stephanie would follow him, essentially track him down. And Stephanie did show up at the house, banging on the front door. She called him and asked him to come outside. He went outside and she went immediately up to him and kissed him. He was very caught off guard by it and kind of stepped back because this, of course, is in the midst of an argument, and, asked her what that was about. And she said, I just wanted to see if there was anything there. And she said, and there's not. And I just remember thinking, well, that was very odd. It just seemed like she was playing a game. This is not normal. This is not okay. She definitely had that Jekyll and Hyde kind of behavior. She was most definitely trying to manipulate him and assert her dominance. That was definitely the moment that I stopped being friendly with her and stopped reaching out to her. At that point, I didn't know what the future held for their relationship. I never in a million years thought it was going to turn out the way it did.
Oh my God. Andy.
I could definitely see Andy trying to have his life appear to be as normal as possible. This is a photograph that Andy had posted on Facebook. It looks like a picture that actually Stephanie took of the two of them, and underneath it there is a comment that Stephanie posted that says, "Oh, who's that hot chick in your car?" Stephanie, it appears, has definitely doctored the photo. She seems to have a filter on her face. The post is all about her. But I also think that was in Andy's nature, to be all about her. Andy responds with, "That's the most beautiful and amazing woman in the world. My partner, my other half, my best friend, my wife, Stephanie Kimbrell." He thinks obviously very highly of her and seems to be very much in love. Thinking about it now, it makes me feel a little bit sick to my stomach. Andy, even if he knew 100% that that relationship was not a good situation, I don't think he ever would have said to us, "You're right." He just tried to be the tough guy police officer.
Andy would not have been the aggressor, in my opinion. Andy was not that type of person. He wasn't the type that would run from anything, but he was also not the person that was trying to provoke anything either. Looking back on it now, there's some signs that we probably missed.
I definitely think it was getting worse. There was a situation where Andy's daughter was on the phone through Snapchat with a friend of hers, and they could see them arguing. The friend could see Stephanie and her behavior, and had even brought up the situation to her mom. The girl was that concerned about what was taking place. If that was happening that night, it was probably happening much more frequently than we heard about or knew about.
In 2018, when I got reassigned, I would see him in passing, and there would be days that he wouldn't be as jovial as normal. There was a change in his demeanor.
We had both moved on to different assignments. I think each of us knew deep inside that we wanted to talk, but we just never went to that level.
Andy was secluding himself from us, and so that was very hard to wrap our minds around. The changes in his personality alone would show you that he was struggling. We never, openly saw him tearful, but you could definitely tell that he was struggling. But it really got to the point where he wasn't spending time with my mom that much. And one day Andy had came over to the house. He had asked me if I could print something out for him. You could tell he was not in the best mood. We were in the living room together, and my son was kind of tugging on his jeans and trying to get his attention. All he had to do was kind of reach down and pick him up and, something. And it didn't happen. I knew something was going on with him, because that was not like him to do that, to go from this doting uncle to, somebody that's pretty much ignoring him. And that was really a moment, I guess, it was really a turning point for me to see that. And so very blatantly said, "Hey, I don't know what is going on with Stephanie or anything else, but, my child deserves to have an uncle that he knows. I'm here to help, but I'm not going to be the person you call when you need something. I want to be a part of your life." I proceeded to say some pretty hurtful things. Some I meant, some I didn't. And our relationship at that point became pretty much non-existent. That was the last conversation I had with him. I would reach out to him periodically just to, to say, hey, I just didn't get a response back. But I remember hearing their arguments became more frequent. The people that lived in the apartment complex reached out to us and told us they saw them arguing in the parking lot. These total strangers are reaching out to us, to tell us these stories. It's one thing to have an argument inside your home, but when you are completely, oblivious to that you're having an argument in the middle of a parking lot with people around, and, I definitely think that shows some sort of escalation, that things are getting out of control. There was one instance where he went to my mom's house and showed her scratches on his neck, where Stephanie had put her hands on his neck. I don't know how they got there, if she was choking him or just had put her hands on him in some form or fashion, but there were visible scratches on his neck that appeared to be, pretty significant. I think most people, including myself, when they hear of a domestic violence situation, you automatically assume it's probably initiated by a male, but things are not always what they seem. My mother was upset. She was obviously very fearful for him. Her words were, "Please come home. You need to get away from her. She's going to kill you." It wasn't a good situation for Andy or Stephanie or the kids, anybody involved in it. On all sides, it was not a good situation. And it is heartbreaking to watch. He never came out and said, yes, I know that our relationship is not right.
I think that Andy just didn't know how to, or didn't know where to go to for help.
He was just completely hiding it from everybody. I think that he was good at turning it on when he needed to turn it on, that I'm fine, I'm good, just let me go to work.
But knowing Andy and the type of person he was, he wanted to fix it. We were frustrated watching it all fold out and wanting to just take him and, and shake him and say, listen to us, please do something.
Oh my God. I need help really bad.
Calm down.
I'm freaking out. Please come and help.
What's going on?
My husband and I were having a disagreement. He put his gun in my hand and it just went off. I'm telling you, I had no idea that was loaded.
Shot your husband down?
Yes. My
You're
God.
responsive right now, ma'am?
I see gurgling, but no. Oh my God. Oh my God. Andy.
About 11:15, I received a phone call from our deputy chief of police, and he said, Andy Kimbrell's been shot. And I was like, where's he at? And he said, he's on his way to UAB. Andy was still alive, and I said, I'm headed to the hospital.
We were asleep in bed, and I got a call, one of the captains from Vestavia Police Department, and his words, I will probably never forget them, were, Andy's been shot, and it doesn't look good. I remember just panic, just absolutely panic, and just not knowing what to do. I didn't know. I mean, I assumed it happened at work, but I didn't know, how do I tell my mom this? What do I say? What's next? I didn't know what to do.
They brought him down to the hospital. So I walked into the emergency room. I met with the nurse and met with the doctor. They let me in the room. where they were working on him. And, you know, I just remember walking in and seeing Andy laying there, and his head was bandaged up, and I could see one of his eyes. But I just remember looking at him and going, "Wake up." And that's when I found out that he had been shot in the head. They had him on a ventilator, and they said, "We're trying to track his brain activity." And everybody was frantically trying to do anything they could for him. And so I remember asking the doctor, if he's shot in the head, is he going to make it?
When I first got the call, my sergeant called me and told me that there had been a shooting at an apartment in Garndale. When I arrived on the scene, I entered the master bedroom. The walk-in closet is to your left, and about middle ways down the wall, there's a door leading into the bathroom. There was a bloody handprint on the toilet. Inside the closet, I could definitely see blood splatter. On one side of the wall, there was a large pool of blood in the corner. At first glance at the blood splatter, I could tell that it was not a long-range shot, that it was fairly close. The gun was a 9mm Glock, fairly standard issue for law enforcement. A shell casing was right outside the door of the closet on the floor of the bedroom. Whoever fired the shot was standing in the doorway of the closet or very close to the doorway of the closet. After leaving the scene, we returned to the police department. Stephanie had been placed in the interview room. We just kind of introduced ourselves, and she agreed to speak to us.
When we have a disagreement, we can't just talk. Andy can't talk. He gets really upset. He's a high-stress, high-anxiety person. So I can't talk to him because he immediately is mad, and then he storms off. And then he comes back, and then he storms, that's just how things go.
What was that argument? What was that particular time? What was the argument?
The whole thing. 90% of him being mad all last night was that trainer. I said, okay, I'm not doing anything wrong. You have nothing to worry about. Just reasonable, rational conversation. I've never been unfaithful to you. I don't so much as look at other men. He didn't want to hear none of it. Lies, lies, lies. BS, BS, BS.
Stephanie told us that he'd accused her in the past of being unfaithful. So according to Stephanie, this argument wasn't out of the blue. She was basically painting a picture of her being just an extremely calm, non-combative, non-argumentative person.
I don't know, we were just scuffling and...
Did he hit you or grab you?
No, nobody hit.
Did he hold him against the wall? Or what?
He just grabbed me, and I was
standing there holding you like this?
in front of the closet, and he spun around and went and got the gun and pulled it out of the holster and shoved it at my hand.
How did he hand it to you? You remember?
He just shoved it. His hands weren't even off it.
Did you say anything to him?
It happened so fast, and it was just, and pow. I don't even know. I don't know.
I've been in law enforcement for over 24 years. I've never seen a gun just go off. On a Glock, the safety is actually on the trigger. So in order to disengage the safety, you have to pull the trigger. So, it was obvious that the trigger was pulled.
When he tried to give you the gun and put it in your chest, why didn't you just walk away in there? I mean, you had a way to get out of there. All you had to do is like, hey, and turn around. But you went and grabbed for the gun.
No, I didn't. I didn't reach for it and grab for it. That's not what happened.
I mean, your hands had to be outward, or they wouldn't have touched the gun. You see what I'm saying?
I don't know. It just happened so fast.
I know that if someone is trying to shove something at me that I don't want, I'm not going to reach for it. I'm going to back away, or I'm going to put my hands up. I'm not going to grab it. The longer she talked, the more question marks and red flags kept popping up.
Under her story, they were both standing up, and Andy had the gun in his hands, and he shoves it into her hands when the gun went off. But the fatal wound, the only wound on Andy, was a bullet strike to his forehead, just above the hairline.
We're trying to figure out why the wound, entry wound, would be on the top of his head. Was he kneeling down?
That towards me.
I don't think he can really be bent over far enough to where the round hits him in the top of the head.
It just wasn't possible for a gun to go off at waist level and the entry wound be basically on the top of the head. It just didn't make sense.
Can we find out about him?
Yeah, I mean, he's at the hospital and the doctors are taking care of him, so.
When we got to the hospital, one of the pastors that the police department uses was there. I don't even remember what he said, but made mention of the coroner. And that's the moment that we learned he had died. And that's the moment that I learned that Stephanie had shot him. I just remember being in shock. This has to be an accident. This has to be, what could have happened? Did she realize what she was doing? Did she, was it an accident? Was it, I never, and even to this day, it's hard to wrap my mind that she possibly could have a gun in her hand and fire it at him. It's hard to make sense of that.
I just got a phone with the doctors, and I'm sorry to tell you this, but he's passed away.
I mainly kind of wanted to just gauge her reaction. And so, in an interview, you can see me just kind of laser focused on her, really. She sounded upset, but when she raised her head up, she wasn't crying.
And they're in the moment of, letting family members know and stuff like that, so kind of going from there.
I looked directly into her eyes, and they were dry as a bone. There was no tears in her eyes whatsoever. What really happened was really going on here. What Stephanie didn't know was down the hall, we had several witnesses that were present in the house that night.
I'm Detective Cannell from the police department, and you are Emma.
When I was told that, it changed everything. Down the hall, we had Stephanie's son and Andy's daughter.
I'm Detective Fennell from the police department, and you are Emma.
Andy's daughter begins to talk, and she kind of just starts describing what she's been through and, again, the loss of her mom at a young age and now the loss of her father. It was very tough not to get emotional interviewing her.
How long after they got together did they start this argument?
When they were dating, they would argue a lot, so I didn't think they would last long because they kept on arguing.
So they've been kind of bickering and fighting from the beginning.
Yeah.
During the arguments, who seemed to be the more aggressive?
She seemed more aggressive.
She did.
I mean, my dad screams, but she's more because I know she's hit him maybe once. And I remember him saying she put him against the wall with it on his neck like that.
According to what we were told, Stephanie was the physical abuser in the relationship. She was the verbal abuser in the relationship. That painted quite a different picture than what Stephanie was telling us. At one point in the evening, she had received a text from Andy saying, lock your doors, she's crazy.
Around 8, I texted, he told me to keep my door locked or something because she was screaming. Stephanie's son advised us that he was asleep the entire time and he didn't hear anything.
When you went to sleep, did you go to sleep, or you just gotta lay there, or what happened? You did go to sleep? Okay. So you didn't hear, okay, all right. So after you went to sleep, you wasn't woke up by arguing or yelling or any loud noises or anything like that? Nothing like that? You pretty sound asleep?
Andy's daughter, she was a very important witness because not only was she directly across the hallway from the incident, she was awake the entire time.
I feel it was 10:30, something close to 11, and I heard her say something give me your gun or something. I'm gonna shoot.
When you were down there waiting on him, you and your sister talked, right? Y'all were talking. What was said? Remember?
I'm not sure what happened. And she said that she asked him for his gun, and he said, "Fine, here it is." And they shoved it in her hand, and she knew it was loaded, and something about firing.
Yeah.
And he said, okay, and then gave it to her. I stayed because I heard that, and then it went off, and I just heard it pop.
When Andy's daughter made the comment to us, it changed everything. I know in my mind, this just changed from an accident to a possible murder. We went back down the hall and spoke with Stephanie again, and we confronted her with that detail.
He said something to the effect of, if you think I'm so bad, then shoot me.
Oh, yeah, he talks to me like that all the time.
And then you replied, well, then give me your gun.
No.
So
I have never asked for that gun.
Okay, so if let's hypothetically say if your kids said that they heard that, they would be lying.
Lying? No. They didn't hear what they think they heard.
See, what you don't understand is they're in two bedrooms with the door shut, and y'all are loud enough. They just didn't make this up.
And they did say that.
And they did say that.
I don't know what to tell you.
Her credibility in my eyes was over. It was done.
In the mugshot, she's clearly injured. Defense attorneys and certainly members of the public, they get to see the mugshot, had some suspicions as to how she got her injuries and been blaming the victim, Andy.
Like this comment here in the picture, you can tell she's been hit. She doesn't deserve to be in jail if she was defending herself.
It's extremely hard to read these comments, just absolutely heartbreaking. The first post says, probably beat her many times before and got away with it. More than likely, she was tired of the abuse. Andy was never abusive to her. You want to scream it from the rooftop, but there's some people that are going to, question the situation, and especially after seeing her booking photo.
This is a video that was taken from the jail surveillance footage that shows Stephanie Keller while she is in custody and handcuffed. This was taken a few hours before her mugshot. The video itself was interesting, to say the least. And she essentially takes a step towards the vending machine. She nails the vending machine with her face. It would seem to be a very intentional act.
It's very difficult to not be able to reach out to these people that are saying these horrible things, and tell them, you're wrong, this is not how this is. This is a very different situation. When we went to the trial, any doubt that I had that this was a horrible accident just went away very quickly. It's hard to think that somebody that I let in my life and had a relationship with is capable of something so horrible. It's a hard pill to swallow to think about that.
When Andy's daughter testified, her story was very impactful for the members of the court. It was impactful for the jury. The judge did come down with a sentence of 20 years in the penitentiary for Stephanie Keller, and that was the maximum under provocation manslaughter.
I think that the sentence that she received was appropriate. I mean, you know, nothing is ever enough. It will never be enough. But it also won't change it, no matter what it is.
As a police officer, we're usually the ones that say, hey, here's how you handle this situation. And when we can't do that for ourselves, we question ourselves as to whether we're a failure. And so we have to reach out for help, just like everybody's reaching out for us to help.
Losing Andy had a very much an emotional impact on the department. Every member of the police department was at the funeral.
People came from everywhere, you know, and they just heard about it and wanted to come and show their respect. It makes you so proud to be driving down the road and seeing flags that are, you know, for him. It was definitely a moment to be proud of him. I mean, I will always be proud of him. He was a really great person and a great father. You know, I wanted to remember all the good things that he did as a police officer. Honestly, if I could say anything to her, I would ask her why. I think she's a horrible person. I think I don't even know if I should say this, but I think this could happen again, given the opportunity.
The heat in West Texas doesn't just sit on you, it hunts you. It was the summer of 1980, a season that felt less like a passage of time and more like a fever dream that refused to break, baking the asphalt of the farm-to-market roads until they shimmered with mirages of water that didn't exist. June 14th, a Saturday, The kind of night that starts with the hum of cicadas and ends with the scream of a siren tearing through the silence, dividing history into before and after. In the small, dust-choked town of Red Creek, before was high school football games, cold beers at the Starlight Drive-In, and doors left unlocked to catch the night breeze. After was a darkness that swallowed a 19-year-old girl whole and left a community looking over its shoulder for 4 decades. We are standing at the edge of a mystery that was supposed to be buried, a case closed by grief and acceptance, a tombstone etched with a name that had no body to claim it. But the grave is empty. The past is not dead. In fact, it just walked through the front door. To understand the shock, the visceral, bone-deep terror of the return, you have to understand the departure. You have to stand on the shoulder of Highway 277 at 2 in the morning, where the only witnesses were the indifferent stars and the sprawling mesquite brush. This is where they found the car. A 1974 Chevy Nova, faded yellow, affectionately known as the Canary by the girl who drove it, Clara Miller. The name was synonymous with sunshine in Red Creek. 19 years old, shifting tables at the Dust Bowl Diner, saving her tips in a mason jar for a one-way ticket to Austin. She had dreams that were too big for a town with 3 stoplights. She had a smile that made the oil riggers soften their voices when they ordered their coffee. And on that night, she had a date with destiny that no one saw coming. The discovery was made by a passing trucker, a man hauling lumber to Odessa who saw the Nova's headlights cutting a stationary beam into the endless dark. He didn't stop because he thought it was trouble. He stopped because the driver's side door was wide open, hanging like a broken wing. When the sheriff's deputies arrived, the scene was frozen in a tableau of interrupted life. The engine was dead, but the hood was still warm to the touch, ticking as it cooled in the night air. The radio was on, playing a low static hum where a station had faded out. And there, on the beige vinyl of the driver's seat, was the first scream of violence, a single, high-velocity spatter of blood. Not a pool, not a massacre, but a spray. Violent. Sudden. The keys were still in the ignition. Her purse, a worn leather satchel filled with the trivial artifacts of a teenage life. Lipstick, a pack of gum, a library book overdue by 2 days, was sitting on the passenger seat, untouched. This wasn't a robbery. This was a predator taking a trophy. Panic travels fast in a small town, faster than the newsprint can carry it. By sunrise, the word abduction was being whispered in the pews of the Baptist church and shouted across the fences of cattle ranches Claire Miller was gone. But it was the details released in the following days that turned the panic into a cold, hard dread. The tire tracks. The investigators found skid marks, not from a Nova, but from a second vehicle. Heavy treads. Mud tires. A truck that had swerved in front, forcing the yellow car to the shoulder. This was calculated. This was a hunt. The sheriff, a man named Jim Holloway who had spent 30 years breaking up bar fights and chasing runaway cattle, stood before the press cameras with a face made of stone and told the public, "We will find her." But looking at the footage now, 40 years later, you can see the doubt in his eyes. He saw the blood on the seat. He saw the scuff marks in the dirt where heels had been dragged against their will. He knew that in the vast, unforgiving expanse of the Texas scrubland, finding a girl who didn't want to be hidden was hard, but finding a girl who had been taken by a monster was nearly impossible. The community mobilized. It was a sight that defines the resilience of the era. Hundreds of volunteers walking shoulder to shoulder through the tall grass, beating the brush with sticks, calling her name until their voices went hoarse. Clara, Clara. The sound echoed off the canyon walls, a desperate prayer rising into the blistering heat. They searched the culverts. They searched the abandoned oil derricks that dotted the landscape like rusting skeletons. They lowered cameras into dried-up wells. Every scrap of clothing found, every discarded shoe, sent a jolt of electricity through the search party, followed by the crushing weight of disappointment when it turned out to be trash. The headline screamed, "Where is Clara?" Week 2. No leads. Teenager vanishes into thin air. The town of Red Creek began to change. The doors were locked now. The drive-in theater saw attendance drop. Fathers walked their daughters to the bus stop with shotguns broken over their arms. The innocence of the 1980s was fracturing, cracking under the weight of the realization that evil didn't just happen in the movies or in the big cities. It was here, driving a truck with mud tires, watching, waiting. Then came the discovery that would seal the narrative for a generation. 3 weeks after the disappearance, July 7th, 1980, a group of hikers in the Big Bend area, miles away from where the Nova was found, stumbled upon a nightmare. A shallow grave. It had been disturbed by coyotes, the harsh reality of nature exposing the cruelty of man. The remains were decomposed, unrecognizable to the naked eye. But the clothing matched. A waitress uniform, a name tag, scratched and dirty, but legible, Clara. The town broke. The hope that had sustained them, the fragile belief that she might just be hurt or lost, shattered instantly. It was a collective trauma. Sheriff Holloway had to deliver the news to Clara's parents, a scene of devastation that took place behind closed curtains but was felt by every neighbor on the block. The forensic science of 1980 was primitive compared to today. DNA profiling was a futuristic dream. They relied on dental records, but the state of the remains made it difficult. They relied on the personal effects. The name tag, the height, the hair color. The coroner signed a death certificate. Cause of death, blunt force trauma. Homicide. Clara Miller was officially dead. A funeral was held. An empty casket was not needed, but the casket they lowered into the ground contained the remains of what everyone believed was their golden girl. The entire town attended. It was a sea of black umbrellas against the harsh white sun. The pastor spoke of angels taken too soon. The choir sang Amazing Grace, but the notes fell flat against the grief. Justice, however, remained elusive. The investigation into the murder of Clara Miller went into overdrive. They had a body now. They needed a killer. Every drifter passing through West Texas was pulled in. Every man with a truck and a record was grilled under the hot lights of the interrogation room. Suspects emerged, fleeting ghosts in the system. There was the boyfriend, hysterical and heartbroken, quickly cleared. There was the creepy janitor at the high school, who had an alibi that held up. There was the rumors of the Route 66 killer, a phantom serial killer operating across state lines. But the leads dried up. The tire tracks were too common. The fingerprints on the car were smudged or belonged to Clara. The evidence, just like the heat, evaporated. Months turned into years. The memorial ribbons tied around the oak trees faded from yellow to gray, then disintegrated in the wind. The case file, a thick cardboard box marked Miller, Clara, homicide, was moved from the active desk to the filing cabinet, and then, eventually, to the basement archives. Cold, frozen, a tragedy that became folklore. New generations grew up in Red Creek, hearing the story as a warning. Don't stay out late, or you'll end up like Clara. She became a ghost story, a spectral figure haunting the edges of the town's consciousness. Her parents passed away, brokenhearted, never seeing the man who killed their daughter put in chains. The house she grew up in was sold, the new owners painting over the height chart on the kitchen door frame. The world moved on. The internet arrived. DNA technology advanced. The oil boom went bust and boomed again. 40 years of silence. 40 years of a lie that everyone accepted as the absolute, tragic truth. But the universe has a way of correcting its errors, sometimes in the most violent way possible. It is now 2020. The world is different, connected, digital, and in a police station in downtown San Antonio, 300 miles from Red Creek, a woman walks in. She is 59 years old. Her face is lined with a map of hardship, her hands trembling as she clutches a worn-out handbag. She doesn't look like a ghost. She looks like a survivor of a war no one knew was being fought. She approaches the desk sergeant, a young man who wasn't even born when the yellow Nova was found on the highway. She takes a breath, a sound that carries the weight of 4 decades of silence. She looks him in the eye and says 4 words that would stop the clocks in Texas. I am Clara Miller. The sergeant blinks. He thinks she's confused. A mental health case. He types the name into the database, expecting nothing or perhaps a minor warrant. but the screen flashes red. The status is clear, bold, and impossible. Deceased. Case closed. 1980. He looks back at the woman. She places a driver's license on the counter. It's an old ID, laminated and peeling, showing a 19-year-old girl with a sunshine smile. She then places a second item on the counter. A locket. Inside, a picture of the Miller family, dated 1979. The room seems to tilt. The air gets thin. If this woman is Clara Miller, then who is in the grave in Red Creek? Who do they bury? And where has this woman been for 40 years? The questions erupt like a dormant volcano. The resurrection has begun, and with it, the unraveling of a mystery that is far darker, far more complex, and far more terrifying than a simple abduction. The dead victim has returned, but she has not come back alone. She has brought her demons with her. The news breaks. It doesn't just ripple, it explodes. Clara Miller alive. The headlines are bigger this time, flashing across smartphones and 24-hour news cycles. The town of Red Creek, now sleepy and forgotten, is suddenly under siege by satellite trucks and reporters. The sheriff's department, now run by a woman named Sheriff Gonzalez, has to dust off a box that hasn't been opened since the Reagan administration. They have to exhume a body. They have to confront the reality that they buried a stranger. But the most chilling part isn't the administrative chaos. It is the story that Clara begins to tell. It is not a story of being lost. It is not a story of amnesia. It is a story of a trapdoor that opened in 1980 and dropped her into a parallel world of captivity and fear. She didn't run away. She was taken, and she was kept, not far away in some foreign land, but close, terrifyingly close. As the DNA swab is sent to the lab to confirm the impossible, the detectives sit down with the woman who claims to be the girl in the yellow car. The interview room is cold. The camera is rolling. She begins to speak, and her voice is rasping and used to long sentences. She talks about the night on the highway. She talks about the truck. She talks about the man. And she mentions a detail, a specific, impossible detail about the interior of the sheriff's car in 1980 that only the killer or the victim could know. The skepticism in the room evaporates, replaced by a creeping horror. This is her. This is Clara. And that means the killer is still out there. Or worse, the killer is someone they know. The investigation is no longer cold. It is burning hot. The timeline of 1980 is being rewritten hour by hour. If Clara is alive, the timeline of the murder is void. The alibis are void. The witnesses who saw things they didn't report are suddenly remembering. The return of Clara Miller isn't a miracle. It's a hand grenade thrown into the past. The atmosphere in Red Creek shifts from shock to suspicion. Neighbors look at neighbors differently. If she was kept close, who had the space? Who had the basement? Who had the land? The man who was the town hero? The quiet rancher? The shadow of the suspect pool widens to engulf the entire town. We are about to peel back the layers of this onion, and every layer will sting the eyes. We will walk through the days of her captivity, the near misses of the search parties, the identity of the woman in the grave, and the sinister network that allowed a girl to vanish in plain sight. This is not just a story of survival. It is a story of a stolen life and the thief who lived among them. The cold case is reversed. The clock is ticking backward, and the truth is about to scream. The fluorescent lights of the San Antonio interview room hummed with a sound that seemed to drill directly into the nerves of everyone present. It was a sterile, windowless box, smelling of stale coffee and floor wax, a place designed to strip away lies. But the woman sitting at the metal table wasn't lying. She was trembling. Clara Miller, or the shell of the woman who used to be her, sat with her hands clasped tight, her knuckles white, her eyes darting to the door as if she expected it to burst open at any second. Detective Mark Henderson, a veteran of the force who had seen everything from cartel hits to crimes of passion, felt a chill crawl up his spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. He was looking at a ghost. He pushed a glass of water toward her. She didn't drink. She just stared at the water mesmerizingly, as if checking for poison. The tape recorder on the table spun silently, catching the ragged edge of her breathing. This wasn't just a statement. It was an excavation of hell. Henderson needed to be sure. The world needed to be sure. Before the story could be believed, the science had to be absolute. The buccal swab had been rushed to the state lab in Austin with a priority code usually reserved for terrorist threats. Code read, Identity Verification. The hours of waiting were excruciating, a slow-motion torture for the detectives pacing the hallway. While the centrifuges spun and the genetic markers were analyzed, Henderson gently began the process of unlocking her memory. Clara, he said softly, using the name that had been etched on a tombstone for 40 years. Tell us about the truck. Tell us about the night. She looked up, and for a moment, the 59-year-old woman vanished, and the terrified 19-year-old girl surfaced in her eyes. Her voice was a whisper, dry like dead leaves. He had a light, she rasped. A red light. On the dashboard. It looked like an eye. She began to recount the abduction, and the details didn't align with the theories of 1980. They shattered them. The skid marks found on the highway weren't from a stranger running her off the road in a fit of road rage. She had pulled over. She had pulled over because she knew the truck. It wasn't a drifter. It wasn't a phantom serial killer from Route 66. It was the blue Ford, she said. The one with the rusted bumper. I thought he was stopping to help. The revelation hit the room like a physical blow. She knew him. The monster wasn't a wolf from the wilderness. He was a sheep from the flock. She described the man approaching her window, the familiar face illuminated by the dome light, the smile that didn't reach his eyes. She didn't scream initially because she was confused. Why was he holding a tire iron? Why was he wearing gloves in the summer heat? The violence happened in a blink. The glass shattering, the heavy metal striking her temple, the world going black. When she woke up, the sky was gone. The stars were gone. She was in the dark, and the smell of damp earth was filling her lungs. While she spoke, the phone in the observation room rang. It was the lab. The silence in the station was absolute as the captain picked up the receiver. He listened, his face draining of color, his jaw setting hard. He hung up and looked at his team through the one-way glass. He nodded once. A single, definitive nod. It was a match. 99.999%. The genetic profile of the woman in the interrogation room was a perfect maternal match to the DNA on file from Claire Miller's late mother, preserved from an old medical procedure. The impossible was now a fact. The woman in the room was Claire Miller. The headline was true. The grave in Red Creek was a lie. The realization sent a shockwave of nausea through the seasoned officers. If this was Clara, then who, in God's name, had they buried in 1980? Who was the girl in the waitress uniform found in the shallow grave? The implications were grotesque. The killer hadn't just murdered. He had staged a play. He had planted a body to stop the search. He had sacrificed another human being just to provide a false ending to Clara's story. Back in the interview room, Clara was reaching the part of the story that would haunt the nightmares of everyone listening. The location. Where did he take you, Clara? Henderson asked, leaning in. Did he take you to Mexico? Did he take you to another state? Clara shook her head slowly, a tear finally tracking through the grime on her cheek. No, she whispered. I could hear the church bells. The detectives froze. The church bells of Red Creek? The First Baptist Church rang its bells every Sunday morning and every Wednesday evening. If she could hear them, she wasn't miles away. She wasn't in a remote cabin in the mountains. She was in town. I was. Underneath, she said. The cellar. The storm cellar. Under the barn. The image formed in their minds, visceral and horrifying. A storm cellar. Those concrete bunkers common in Tornado Alley, buried deep in the earth, soundproof, dark, forgotten. She had been held in a hole in the ground, perhaps only a few miles from her own front door, while her parents wept and the town searched. The timeline she laid out was fractured, broken by trauma. She didn't know years. She knew seasons. She knew the cold that seeped through the concrete in what must have been winter. She knew the stifling, suffocating heat that turned the bunker into an oven in August. She spoke of the visits. He would come down, sometimes with food, canned beans, stale bread, water that tasted of rust. Sometimes he came for other things. She stopped speaking then, her body rocking back and forth, a protective mechanism kicking in to shield her from the memory of the abuse. The detectives didn't push. They didn't need the graphic details to understand the enormity of the crime. This was slavery. This was a domestic dungeon operating in the shadow of a typical American town. She described how he told her the world had ended. He told her her parents were dead. He told her the police were looking for her to arrest her for a crime she didn't commit. He built a psychological cage that was stronger than the steel door at the top of the stairs. Gaslighting on an industrial scale. News of the DNA confirmation hit Red Creek like a meteor strike. The sleepy town square was suddenly choked with vans, satellite dishes, and reporters shouting into microphones. Breaking news. The girl in the grave is not Clara. The current residents of Red Creek looked at each other with dawning horror. The trust that holds a small community together evaporated instantly. If she was here, if she was held in a barn within earshot of the church bells, then someone knew. Someone saw something. Or worse, everyone saw something and chose not to see it. The sheriff's department was under siege. Sheriff Gonzalez, a tough, no-nonsense woman who had inherited this mess, stood on the steps of the precinct. The microphones thrust in her face like spears. "We are reopening the investigation immediately," she announced, her voice cutting through the frenzy. "We are currently securing a location based on the victim's testimony. We'll find this place, and we will find the monster who built it." But the killer had a 40-year head start. The primary question burning in everyone's mind was, is he still alive? Is he still in Red Creek? Clara had escaped, she said. The lock had rusted. The hinge had given way after a heavy rainstorm, the remnants of a hurricane that had swept through the coast and dumped water inland. She had clawed her way out, emerging into a world that was alien to her. She had walked for miles in the dark until she found highway, then hitched a ride with a trucker who thought she was a homeless addict. She didn't tell him who she was. She was too scared. She just wanted to get to the city, to the police, to safety. She hadn't seen the captor's face in a long time, she said. Maybe days, maybe weeks. He had stopped coming. Had he died? Had he moved? Or was he lying in wait, watching the news right now, realizing his secret was out? The investigators needed a name. Clara hesitated. The fear was ingrained, a reflex conditioned by pain. They called him, the Deacon. The nickname sent a ripple of confusion through the room. The Deacon? Was it a religious title, a nickname, or a mockery? She explained that she never knew his real name, or if she did, she had blocked it out. But she remembered the truck, the blue Ford, and she remembered the location relative to the sounds. The train whistle. At 4 a.m., she murmured, and the bells, and the smell of sulfur, the oil fields, or something else. The detectives pulled out the maps of Red Creek from 1980, overlaying them with modern satellite imagery. They triangulated the church bells. They marked the train tracks. They looked for the intersection of sound and smell. The circle on the map tightened. It centered on an area known as Miller's Ridge, ironically named, though not related to her family. It was an area of old homesteads, scattered ranches, and dense brush. The team moved out. It was a convoy of black SUVs, speeding down the highway toward Red Creek, sirens wailing, cutting through the heat haze. In the back of the lead car, Clara sat huddled in a blanket, staring out the window at a landscape that was both familiar and foreign. The mesquite trees were the same. The sky was the same. But the cars were different. The signs were different. She was a time traveler returning to the scene of the catastrophe. They were taking her back to identify the house, to point out the barn, to show them the entrance to hell. As they approached the town limits, the sign, "Welcome to Red Creek, population 2,500," flashed by. It felt like a warning. The town was holding its breath. The excavation of the false grave was already scheduled for the morning. But tonight, the priority was the bunker. They had to know if anyone else was down there. They had to know if the Deacon had taken another girl to replace Clara. The convoy turned off the main highway onto a gravel road. Dust billowed up, choking the air. Clara's breathing hitched. "Here," she whispered. "Turn here." The driver swerved onto a narrow, rutted track that wound through overgrown scrub oak. The property at the end of the lane was a ruin, a farmhouse that had collapsed in on itself. The roof caved in, the windows staring like empty sockets. Weeds grew waist-high in the yard. It looked abandoned for decades. "That's the house," Clara said, her voice trembling. But the barn was red. There was no red barn, only a pile of rotted timber and rusted corrugated metal. Had it been demolished? Or had nature reclaimed it? The tactical team exited the vehicles, weapons drawn, moving with military precision. They swept the perimeter. The silence was heavy, broken only by the wind whistling through the ruins. "Where was the door, Clara?" Henderson asked, guiding her gently but firmly. She pointed to a patch of ground near the debris of the fallen structure, covered by a tangle of blackberry bushes and old tires. "There," she said, "under the wood." 2 officers moved forward, clearing the debris. They dragged away the tires. They pulled back the rotting wood. And there, beneath the detritus of 40 years, was a slab of concrete. And set into the concrete, a steel door. Heavy, rusted shut, but unmistakable. It was real. The story was real. The dungeon existed. A collective gasp went through the team. They were standing on top of the box where a woman's life had been stolen. They called for the hydraulic spreaders, the jaws of life. The metal groaned, a screeching protest against being disturbed. With a final, ear-splitting crack, the hinges gave way. The door was pried open, revealing a black maw descending into the earth. The smell that wafted up was ancient and foul. Damp, mold, and the unmistakable scent of human misery. Flashlights cut into the gloom. Concrete steps led down. "Clear," the lead officer shouted, his voice echoing into the abyss. They descended. The cameras followed. What they found at the bottom would change criminal history. It wasn't just a room. It was a fully equipped cell. A mattress on a pallet. A bucket. A shelf with a few tattered books. And on the wall, scratched into the concrete with a rock or a fingernail, were thousands of tally marks. Groups of 5. Days. Weeks. Years. A calendar of lost time. But it was what they found in the corner of the room that stopped their hearts. A collection of items. Trophies. Not just Clara's. There was a red hair ribbon, a child's plastic watch, a pair of glasses that didn't belong to Clara. The realization hit Henderson like a punch to the gut. The deacon hadn't just taken Clara. She wasn't the only one. She was just the only one who survived. The bunker was a vault of secrets, and as they swept the beam of light across the floor, they saw a loose stone in the wall. Behind it, a small, hidden compartment. Inside was a ledger. A small black notebook. Henderson picked it up with a gloved hand. He opened it. The pages were filled with handwriting, dates, names, and next to the name, Clara, a date, June 14th, 1980. But above it were other names. Names from 1975. Names from 1972. Cold cases that had been forgotten. The deacon was not just a kidnapper. He was one of the most prolific serial predators the state had ever seen. And he had been operating in silence, right under the nose of the law, for half a century. As the team processed the scene, a deputy came running from the main house ruin. "Sir, you need to see this." Henderson left the bunker, his mind reeling. He followed the deputy to the collapsed farmhouse. Inside, amidst the rubble, was a metal box that had survived the elements. Inside were tax documents, deeds, papers that identified the owner of the property. The name on the deed was not the deacon. It was a name that everyone in Red Creek knew. A name that was etched on the donor plaque of the high school stadium. A name that was spoken with reverence at the Rotary Club. Arthur P. Vance, the town's beloved philanthropist. The man who had organized the search parties for Clara Miller in 1980. The man who had comforted her parents. The man who had stood at the funeral and wiped away a tear. The shock was total. Arthur Vance was a pillar of the community. He was elderly now, living in a nursing home in the next county, suffering from dementia. Or was he? The betrayal was absolute. The monster didn't have fangs. He had a checkbook and a kind smile. He had hunted them, and then he had led them in prayer for the victims. The police radios crackled with a new urgency. Locate Arthur Vance. Suspect is to be considered armed and dangerous, despite age. They had to get to him before he died. They had to get to him before he forgot, or before he decided to take one last secret to the grave. The race was on. The sun was setting over Red Creek, painting the sky the color of a bruise. The dead girl had returned, and she had just pointed a finger at the heart of the town itself. The night was far from over. Script title: Texas 1980 Cold Case Reversed. The dead victim unexpectedly returns after 40 years. Part 3. The Wolf in the Fold. The sun had fully set over Red Creek, plunging the scrubland into a bruised purple twilight. But for the investigators speeding toward the county line, the darkness was just beginning. The convoy of black SUVs tore down the interstate, their lights flashing in a silent, strobe-lit frenzy. They were hunting a ghost, a man who had already been canonized by the town he preyed upon. Arthur P. Vance. The name felt heavy in Detective Henderson's mouth, tasting of ash and betrayal. This was the man who had bought the new scoreboard for the high school. This was the man who had shaken hands with governors. This was the man who, 40 years ago, had stood in a living room that smelled of grief and casserole dishes, looking Clara Miller's father in the eye, promising to fund the search until the very end. And he had kept that promise. He had funded the search. He had directed it. He had steered it away from the old farmhouse on the ridge, away from the Red Barn, away from the trapdoor hidden beneath the earth. He hadn't been looking for Clara. He had been curating her disappearance. The destination was Shady Oaks, a high-end assisted living facility nestled in the hill country, a place where the wealthy went to fade away in comfort. It was a stark contrast to the hellhole they had just uncovered. As the police vehicles screeched into the circular driveway, scattering gravel and shattering the evening calm, the automatic glass doors slid open with a polite whoosh. The staff at the front desk, a young nurse in pastel scrubs, dropped her clipboard. She didn't see law enforcement. She saw an invasion. Officers in tactical gear poured into the lobby, their boots squeaking on the polished linoleum, weapons lowered but ready. This wasn't a courtesy call. This was a raid on a sanctuary. Room 304. Henderson barked, flashing his badge so fast it was a blur. Arthur Vance. Now. The nurse pointed a trembling finger toward the east wing. The scent here was lavender and antiseptic, masking the underlying odor of decay. It was the smell of the end of life, civilized and sanitized. A far cry from the bucket and the mold of the bunker. They reached room 304. The door was closed. A nameplate on the door featured a little cardboard cutout of a sailboat, a cheerful decoration for a man who had anchored unsuspecting souls in the dark. Henderson signaled the team. 1 breath. 2. He threw the door open. The room was dim, illuminated only by the flicker of a television playing a rerun of an old game show. And there he was, the monster, the deacon. He was sitting in a recliner, wrapped in a knitted blanket, a cup of applesauce resting on the tray table. He looked small, shrunken. His skin was like parchment, his hair a wispy halo of white. He didn't look like a killer. He looked like a grandfather waiting for a Sunday visit. He turned his head slowly, his eyes watery and vacant, blinking against the sudden intrusion of the hallway light. Is it time for dinner?" he quavered. The voice was thin, reedy. It was the voice of a man whom time had already defeated. Henderson stepped into the room, holstering his weapon, but keeping his hand near it. He felt a surge of revulsion, so potent it nearly made him dizzy. This frailty was a disguise, even if it was real now. "Arthur Vance," Henderson said, his voice hard, devoid of the deference usually paid to the elderly. "I am Detective Henderson. You are under arrest for the kidnapping and false imprisonment of Clara Miller." The name hung in the air, suspended between the canned laughter of the television and the sterile silence of the room. Vance stared at him. A line of drool escaped the corner of his mouth. He frowned, a look of genuine confusion clouding his features. "Clara," he mumbled. "Clara, my niece." "No, I don't have a niece." The dementia defense. It was the ultimate firewall. Was he faking? Or had his mind truly eroded, taking the map of his crimes with it? Henderson moved closer, leaning down until he was inches from the old man's face. He needed to provoke a reaction. He needed to see the spark of the predator. Not your niece, Arthur. The girl. The girl in the yellow Nova. The girl you kept in the storm cellar. The girl you visited for 40 years. Vance's eyes shifted. The vacuous look tightened. For a split second, the fog lifted. The watery blue eyes sharpened into points of steel. A muscle in his jaw twitched. It was a micro-expression, a fleeting glimpse of the man who had wielded the tire iron. He didn't speak, but a smile, a cruel, thin-lipped smirk, ghosted across his face. She was broken, Vance whispered, his voice suddenly dropping an octave, losing the tremor. Toys break. You put them away. The air in the room froze. The officers behind Henderson stiffened. He hadn't denied it. In the twilight of his sanity, the confession leaked out like poison. Where are the others, Arthur? Henderson pressed, his heart hammering against his ribs. Who else is in the ground? Vance blinked, and the clarity vanished as quickly as it had appeared. He slumped back into the recliner, his hands trembling again. I want my pudding, he whined, reverting to the helpless invalid. Nurse? Nurse. The moment was gone, but they had heard it. The toys. The admission of objectification. They cuffed him. It was a surreal sight, shackling the wrists of a man who could barely walk. They wheeled him out of the facility, past the stunned residents gathering in the hallways, past the weeping nurses who couldn't reconcile the sweet old man in 304 with the monster the police were describing. As they loaded him into the cruiser, the flashing lights reflected in his eyes, and for a moment, he looked delighted, as if he were the grand marshal of a parade he had been waiting for all his life. He was secure, but the mystery was far from solved. In fact, Vance's capture only deepened the shadows around the central question. If Clara was alive, and Vance had her, then who was the girl in the grave? While Vance was being transported to a secure ward at the county hospital, a second team was assembling at the Red Creek Cemetery. It was midnight now. The iron gates of the cemetery were unlocked by a shivering caretaker. The beam of the floodlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the headstone that had been a site of pilgrimage for 40 years. Clara Miller, 1961 to 1980. Beloved daughter. It was a lie carved in granite. The forensic anthropologist, Dr. Eris Thorne, stood ready with her team. They were dressed in white hazmat suits, looking like astronauts on a dead planet. The backhoe rumbled to life, its mechanical arm reaching out to claw at the earth. This wasn't just an exhumation. It was a crime scene investigation 40 years delayed. The soil was packed hard, resisting the shovel, as if the earth itself wanted to keep the secret. Layer by layer, the dirt was removed. The thud of the soil hitting the spoil pile was a rhythmic drumbeat of anticipation. Finally, the scrape of metal on concrete. The vault. They hooked the chains. The winch groaned. Slowly, impossibly heavy, the concrete lid was lifted, revealing the casket beneath. It was water-damaged, the wood warped, the metal handles tarnished. But it was intact. They lifted it out, placing it on a portable table set up under a tent to shield it from the prying eyes of the drones that were already buzzing in the night sky like mechanical mosquitoes. The media had arrived. The perimeter was a circus of lights and cameras, but inside the tent, the mood was somber, almost religious. They were about to disturb the rest of a Jane Doe who had been stripped of her name, even in death. Dr. Thorne pried the lid open. The smell of earth and time wafted out. Inside lay the skeletal remains. The uniform was there, the fabric disintegrated but recognizable. The name tag, Clara, was loose in the thoracic cavity, having fallen as the tissue decomposed. But Dr. Thorne didn't look at the name tag. She looked at the bones. She looked at the skull. She picked up the mandible, turning it under the harsh LED light. "Stop," she said, her voice echoing in the tent. "This isn't right." Henderson, who had arrived from the nursing home, stepped forward. "What is it?" Thorne pointed to the teeth. Clara Miller had a root canal on her lower right molar. It was in her dental records. We used it to confirm, or we thought we did. She pointed to the jawbone in the casket. "These teeth are pristine. No fillings. No root canals." She moved down to the pelvic bone. And look at the epiphyses, the growth plates. This victim, she was a 19. Henderson felt the ground shift. How old? Thorne looked up, her face grim behind the visor. 16, maybe 17. She was younger, and she was smaller. The realization was nauseating. Vance hadn't just found a random body to use as a decoy. He had hunted a specific type. A girl who looked enough like Clara to pass a cursory inspection in 1980, when DNA wasn't an option. He had likely chosen a runaway, someone whose disappearance wouldn't trigger a massive manhunt in the next county. He had dressed her in Clara's clothes. He had pinned Clara's name tag on her chest, and he had smashed her face to prevent visual identification. This was a premeditated murder solely for the purpose of covering up a kidnapping. It was a nesting doll of atrocities. "We need to identify her," Henderson said, his voice ragged. "She's been lying under Clara's name for 4 decades. She deserves her own." They bagged the remains carefully. This was a new homicide case. Jane Doe 1980. But the connection to the bunker was screaming to be made. Henderson remembered the trophies in the storm cellar. The glasses. The child's watch. He thought of the ledger. He pulled his phone out and called the team still processing the bunker. "The ledger," he said. "Look for a date. July 1980. Or late June. Look for a name that corresponds to a runaway." There was a pause on the line, the sound of pages turning. "Boss," the deputy on the other end said, "we have a list of acquisitions and disposals. There's an entry here, July 4th, 1980. It just says, the substitute. The substitute." The callousness of the label made Henderson want to punch the wall. Vance had viewed people as inventory. Clara was the keeper. This poor girl was the substitute. The ledger was the key. It was the Rosetta Stone of missing persons in West Texas. But as they loaded the remains into the coroner's van, a new piece of evidence came to light from the bottom of the casket. Something that had been hidden beneath the body, perhaps slipped in by the killer as a private joke, or perhaps dropped by the victim in a final act of defiance. It was a small, plastic object encrusted with dirt. Dr. Thorne cleaned it off with a brush. It was a keychain, a cheap plastic souvenir keychain. It was shaped like a guitar, and on the back, printed in faded letters, Graceland. Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis, Henderson muttered. She wasn't local. This girl had come from hundreds of miles away. Maybe hitchhiking. Maybe a runaway dreaming of Nashville or Austin. She had crossed paths with Vance, perhaps at a gas station, perhaps on a roadside. And she had become a prop in his sick theater. The scope of the investigation just exploded. They were no longer dealing with a Texas crime. They were dealing with an interstate predator who used the highways as his hunting grounds. And Vance. Vance had traveled. He was a philanthropist, a businessman. He went to conferences. He went on fishing trips. Every trip was now a potential murder spree. Back at the station, the whiteboard was filling up. 2 columns, Clara's story and the Deacon's timeline. They were trying to merge them. But there was a gap. A terrifying gap. Clara had said she escaped because the lock rusted. But in the interrogation, she had mentioned something else, something they had glossed over in the rush to find the bunker. She had said he stopped coming. Why did he stop? Vance wasn't dead. He was in a nursing home, yes, but he had only been there for 6 months. Before that, he was living in his mansion on the other side of town. Why did he stop going to the bunker? Was it the dementia? Did he simply forget he had a captive? The idea was chilling. A woman left a star because her captor lost his mind. But Henderson suspected something darker. He pulled up the intake records for Arthur Vance at Shady Oaks. He looked at the medical history. A stroke. 2 years ago. That explained the decline. But who managed his affairs? Who paid the bills? Who cleaned out his house? A name appeared on the power of attorney documents. A name that made Henderson's blood run cold. It wasn't a lawyer. It wasn't a bank. It was a family member. David Vance. Arthur's son. The son who still lived in Red Creek. The son who was a deacon at the church now. The son who had never left town. If Arthur was incapacitated, did David know? The question hung heavy in the smoke-filled room. Did the son inherit the sins of the father? Or was the son cleaning up the mess? Clara had said the deacon. They assumed it was a nickname for Arthur. But what if the deacon wasn't Arthur? What if Arthur was the architect, but David? David was the jailer? Or worse, what if the name deacon referred to the actual position in the church, a title that had been passed down? The police cars revved up again. The night was demanding more. They had the old wolf. Now they had to go find the cub, and the cub was in his prime. The siren wail had faded, replaced by the low, predatory rumble of idling engines. It is 2 a.m. in Red Creek, and the town is no longer sleeping. It is watching from behind twitching curtains and locked doors. The darkness has been peeled back, layer by rotting layer, and now the investigation turns its gaze from the ruins of the past to the pristine facade of the present. The convoy of law enforcement vehicles does not head back to the station. Instead, it turns sharply onto Highland Drive, the wealthiest street in the county. This is where the oil money lives. This is where the cattle barons built their brick fortresses. And this is where David Vance, the only son of the monster, sleeps in a house paid for by a legacy of blood. David Vance. The name commands respect in this zip code. At 55, he is the mirror image of his father's younger self. Handsome in a rugged, weathering steel sort of way, a silver cross always pinned to his lapel. He is a deacon at the First Baptist Church. He is the man who organizes the canned food drives. He is the man who hands out scholarships to underprivileged kids. And, according to the documents found in the rubble of the farmhouse, he is the man who holds the power of attorney over Arthur Vance. He holds the keys to the bank accounts, the properties, and, perhaps, the cages. The question burning in Detective Henderson's mind as he checks the load in his service weapon is simple. Did the son know? Was he a victim of his father's deception, blindly signing checks for a storage facility he never visited? Or is the rot in the family tree not a bug, but a feature? The house looms ahead, a sprawling ranch-style mansion with white pillars and a manicured lawn that looks like green velvet under the streetlights. It is a fortress of respectability. Henderson signals the team. There will be no polite knock this time. The exigency of the situation, the risk of evidence destruction, the potential for more victims, demands a hammer, not a scalpel. Breach, he whispers into the radio. The front door, a masterpiece of mahogany and stained glass, splinters inward under the force of the battering ram. The sound is like a gunshot, shattering the suburban quiet. Police! Search warrant! Get on the ground! The shout is a cacophony of voices, a wall of sound designed to disorient and subdue. Inside, the scene is one of domestic normalcy interrupted by chaos. David Vance is found in his study, wearing a silk robe, a book open on his lap. He doesn't scramble. He doesn't run. He stands up, his face a mask of indignation, not fear. What is the meaning of this? He bellows, his voice booming with the authority of a man who is used to giving orders, not taking them. But then he sees the guns. He sees the sheer number of officers flooding his Persian rugs. And then he sees Henderson. The look that passes between them is electric. It isn't confusion in David's eyes. It is calculation. He is assessing the threat level. He is doing the math. David Vance, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit kidnapping and accessory to murder. Henderson recites, the Miranda rights flowing automatically. As the cuffs click onto David's wrists, the town's golden boy looks at the detective with a sneer that curls his lip. You're making a mistake, he hisses. My father is a sick man. I have nothing to do with his eccentricities. Eccentricities. That is what he calls a dungeon in the ground. That is the word he chooses for 40 years of rape and torture. Henderson feels a surge of rage, hot and blinding, but he pushes it down. He needs David talking, not shutting down. We found a ledger, David. Henderson lies, bluffing to shake the tree. We know about the substitute. We know about the transition. The color drains from David's face. The mention of the ledger hits a nerve. He is hauled out into the night, the flashing blue lights dancing on his pale skin. The neighbors are out now, standing in their driveways in bathrobes, phones raised, recording the fall of the House of Vance. It is a biblical scene, the casting out of the false prophet. But the arrest is only the opening move. The real work begins inside the house. The forensic team, fresh from a horror of the bunker and the graveyard, begins to dismantle the life of David Vance. They are looking for the connection. They are looking for the overlap. While the search creates a whirlwind in the mansion, Henderson retreats to the mobile command center parked on the street. He needs to talk to Clara. She is currently in a safe house, a motel room under heavy guard on the outskirts of town. He dials the number. A female officer puts the phone to Clara's ear. "Clara," Henderson says gently, "we have arrested Arthur's son, David Vance." There's a silence on the line, heavy and thick. "Clara." "David," she whispers, testing the name like a foreign object. I remember a David." Henderson's grip on the phone tightens. "How do you remember him, Clara? Did you see him?" Clara's voice trembles, traveling across the line like a ghost. "No, I never saw his face. But sometimes when he was finished, he would talk. He would talk to someone outside the door." Henderson freezes. An accomplice? A witness? Who was he talking to? "He called him Davy," Clara says. "He would say, 'Davy, fetch the hose.' Or 'Davy, lock it up.' I thought Davy was a hired hand. I thought he was a worker." The revelation is sickening. David wasn't just aware. He was present. He was the apprentice. He was the one standing on the other side of the steel door, listening to the screams, and then turning the key. He had grown up with a captive woman as a dark family pet. Back inside the mansion, the search team strikes gold. In the study, behind a false panel in the built-in bookshelf, a cliché that proves true often enough to check, they find a safe. It is modern, biometric. They don't need David's finger. They have the warrant to drill it. Sparks fly as the drill bites into the hardened steel. 20 minutes later, the door swings open. Inside, there is no money. There are no jewels. There are hard drives. Stacks of them, labeled by year. 1990, 1995, 2005, and a box of cassette tapes. The technology spans decades. A museum of recording media. Henderson arrives just as they are bagging the drives. He picks up a cassette tape labeled 1982, Session 4. He finds an old tape deck in the study, plugs it in, and presses play. The sound is grainy, filled with static. Then a voice cuts through. It is Arthur Vance, 40 years younger, strong and vibrant. "Tell me your name," Arthur says. Then a whimper. A young girl's voice. "Clara. My name is Clara Miller." "Wrong," Arthur barks. "Your name is number 1. Say it." "I am number 1. Henderson hits stop. The room is silent. The air feels contaminated. These aren't just records. They're training tapes. But why keeps them? Why would David, a man so careful about his image, keep this radioactive evidence? The answer lies in the psychology of the offender. Trophies are not just for remembering. They are for reliving. But there is something else in the safe. A file folder. Blue cardstock. Inside, legal documents. Trust funds. Bank transfers. And emails. Printed emails from 2018. They are between David Vance and a construction company in Nevada. The subject line, excavation project, Site B. Henderson reads the text, his eyes widening. Regarding the containment unit at the secondary location. Specs attached. Soundproofing essential. Site B. The words hang in the air like a guillotine blade. The bunker they found in Red Creek wasn't unique. It was a prototype, or it was the first of franchise. Get David Vance into the box. Now, Henderson barks into his radio, and get a team to search the coordinates in these emails. The scope of the horror has just doubled. If there's a Site B, there are more victims. The substitute in the grave wasn't the only other one. The timeline of the Deacon didn't end with Arthur's stroke. It expanded. David didn't just maintain the status quo. He industrialized it. He took his father's primitive dungeon and upgraded it. At the station, David Vance sits in the interrogation room. He has lawyered up. A shark in a suit sits next to him. A man named Sterling who charges $500 an hour to keep monsters on the street. "My client has no comment," Sterling says smoothly. Henderson ignores the lawyer. He places a photo on the table. It's a picture of the storm cellar. Then he places a second photo. The printout of the email about Site B. David's eyes flick down. The arrogance wavers. For the first time, fear creeps in. Not fear of the police, but fear of exposure. The mask of the Deacon is cracking. "We know about Davy," Henderson says softly. We have the tapes, David. We have your father's voice calling your name while a girl screamed in the background. You were there. You were 12 years old. You grew up watering the lawn while a woman rotted underneath it. And then, when Daddy got sick, you took over the family business. David stays silent, but his breathing speeds up. His hands, resting on the table, clench into fists. Where is Site B, David? Henderson leans in. Is there someone there right now? Because if there is, and she dies while you play games with your lawyer, that's a capital murder charge. That's the needle, David. Texas doesn't blink. The lawyer tries to intervene. Detective, you are intimidating my... David holds up a hand. He looks at Henderson. The veneer of the church deacon falls away completely. His eyes are cold, dead things. You think you understand, David says quietly. You think it's about hurting them. It's not. It's about saving them. Saving them from what? Henderson asks. From the filth, David says, his voice taking on the cadence of a sermon. From the sin. The world is burning, detective. We provided. Sanctuary. The delusion is complete. A shared psychosis between father and son. They didn't see themselves as kidnappers. They saw themselves as saviors, punishing the wicked women by locking them away from the world. It is a twisted, fundamentalist madness that justifies any atrocity. But David's slip, we provided, is the confession they needed. We, joint enterprise. Suddenly, the door to the interrogation room bursts open. It's Sheriff Gonzalez. She looks pale. Henderson, outside. Now. Henderson steps out. The hallway is buzzing with frantic energy. What is it? Gonzalez holds up a tablet. The search team at David's house found something else. In the garage, behind the workbench. She swipes the screen. It's a photo of a vehicle. A truck. A vintage Ford F-150. Blue. Raised suspension. Mud tires. It has been restored, polished, kept under a tarp like a classic collectible. It's the truck, Gonzalez says. The truck from 1980. He kept it. But that's not the news. Check the bed of the truck, Gonzalez says. Henderson swipes to the next photo. The bed of the truck is clean, but luminol has been sprayed. It is glowing blue, a constellation of old blood. And in the corner of the truck bed, wedged between the liner and the metal, is a small, rusted object. A license plate, not a Texas plate, an Oklahoma plate. 1979. Run it, Henderson says. We did, Gonzalez replies. It belongs to a vehicle registered to a Sarah Jenkins. Reported missing from Tulsa. August 1979. Henderson leans against the wall, the weight of the night crushing him. 1979, a year before Clara. Arthur Vance had been hunting before Clara, and he had been hunting across state lines. But the real horror is the realization of what this means for Clara. She wasn't the first. She was just the one who lasted. Why? Why did she survive when Sarah Jenkins didn't? What made Clara special? The answer might lie in the tapes. Get the tech guys to digitize every second of those tapes, Henderson orders. I want to hear everything. Every conversation. Every whisper. As he walks back toward the interrogation room, his phone buzzes. It's the team checking the coordinates for Site B. Detective, the voice on the line is static-filled and urgent. We're at the location. It's a storage unit facility in Nevada. It's huge. And detective, the unit registered to Vance. It has power running to it. The meter is spinning. Power means life support. Power means ventilation. Someone is alive in Nevada. The timeline of the rescue has just collapsed from days to minutes. Henderson spins around. Get the feds involved. Get a tactical team in Nevada. We are breaching Site B. The cold case has turned into an active hostage situation across 2 states. The deacon and his son didn't just build a dungeon. They built a network. And tonight, the network is coming down. But as Henderson looks through the glass at David Vance, he sees the man smiling again. A small, knowing smile, as if he knows something they don't. As if Site B is just a distraction from Site C. The nightmare is Hydra-headed. Cut one off, and 2 more hiss in the dark. The signal bounces off a satellite 22,000 miles above the Earth, connecting a command center in Texas to a tactical frequency in the Nevada desert. It is 3 a.m. Pacific time. The location is an industrial park on the edge of Las Vegas, a city built on the concept of illusions, where things are never quite what they seem. The target is a nondescript metal warehouse, surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. To the passing cars on the interstate, it is just another logistics hub, a place where slot machines or hotel linens are stored. But to the FBI SWAT team stacking up at the corrugated steel door is Site B. It is the evolution of the dungeon. If the cellar in Red Creek was the rough draft of a madman, this is the polished final edition. The air is dry, electric with the static of imminent violence. The order comes through the earpiece, a single, crisp command: execute. The breach is surgical. Explosive charges blow the hinges, sending the heavy doors spinning inward into the darkness. Flashbangs detonate. Boom flash, disorienting anyone inside with a concussive wall of light and sound. FBI, down. Get down. The agents sweep into the cavernous space, their weapon lights cutting through the lingering smoke. The warehouse is not filled with crates. It is filled with a single, large structure. A modular home, a prefabricated house erected inside the shell of the warehouse, completely cut off from the sun, the wind, and the world. It is a dollhouse in a bottle. The windows of the modular home are blacked out. The front door is reinforced steel. This isn't storage, it is a habitat. The team breaches the inner door. They expect a dungeon. They expect chains. What they find is far more disturbing. They find a living room. It is decorated in a style that can only be described as 1950s sitcom. Floral wallpaper, a heavy oak television cabinet, a crocheted throw on the sofa. And sitting on that sofa, freezing in the beam of the tactical lights, is a woman. She is not bound. She is not gagged. She is wearing a modest, knee-length dress, her hair brushed to a shine. She holds a book in her lap. She looks up at the heavily armed men, screaming orders, and she doesn't scream. She doesn't cower. She simply closes her book, places it on the coffee table, and folds her hands. Her eyes are wide, but they are void of the frantic terror of a kidnapped victim. They are the eyes of someone who has been waiting for an inspection. Ma'am, show me your hands. Are you injured? The lead agent moves in, checking for threats. The woman remains eerily calm. I am clean, she says softly. I have finished my reading. The agent pauses, confused by the non sequitur. What is your name? He demands, pulling her gently to her feet. She looks at him with a tilted head, as if he is a puzzle. I'm Mary, she says. I'm the keeper of the house. The agent checks his wrist computer, scanning her face against the missing persons database. The match is instantaneous. Her name is not Mary. Her name is Lisa Thorne, a college student from Phoenix, Arizona. Missing since 2012. 8 years. She vanished while walking to her car after a night shift at the library. Her parents have held vigils every year. And here she is 300 miles away, sitting in a fake living room, playing house for a ghost. The psychology of the scene hits the team harder than the physical danger. This isn't just captivity, it is total reprogramming. The Stockholm Syndrome here has been weaponized, refined into a cult of one. As they lead Lisa out of the warehouse and into the cool desert night, she looks up at the sky, the real sky, studded with stars she hasn't seen in nearly a decade, and she flinches. It's too big, she whispers, shielding her eyes. Put me back. The deacon won't like it if I leave the sanctuary. The deacon. The name travels across the radio waves back to Texas, confirming the link. David Vance didn't just inherit a prisoner. He inherited a methodology. He built a better cage, not to torture, but to convert. Back in Red Creek, Detective Henderson is listening to the origin of this madness. The cassette tapes from the safe are spinning in the old deck, the magnetic ribbon hissing with the ghosts of 1982. He has headphones on, his eyes closed, immersing himself in the nightmare. The voice of Arthur Vance is smooth, pedantic, like a stern schoolteacher. Lesson 4, the tape announces, discipline and reward. Then the sound of a slap. Sharp, brutal, followed by Clara's voice, young and broken. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, Arthur says. Be better. The world out there is chaos, Clara. Here, there is order. I am giving you order. Henderson fast-forwards. He needs to hear the son. He finds on a tape marked 1985, apprenticeship. The voice of a teenage David Vance breaks into the recording. He sounds hesitant, unsure. Dad? She's crying again. Arthur's voice is distant, echoing in the cellar. And what do we do when the subject rejects the gift, David? A pause. We correct them, David stammers. Good. Take the water away. 2 days. Let her think about the thirst. The thirst is clarity. Henderson feels a wave of nausea. This is the grooming of a monster. David wasn't born without empathy. It was surgically removed, layer by layer, by his father. He was taught that cruelty was kindness, that starvation was education. The sanctuary delusion that David spouted in the interrogation room wasn't a lie to him. It was his religion. But the tape reveals something else. A third voice. Faint, in the background of a recording from 1988. It's the sound of a baby crying. Henderson jams his finger on the rewind button. He plays it again. Cry. Wail. Silence. He turns up the volume until the static screams. It is definitely an infant. But Clara didn't have a baby. The medical reports from her initial exam, after escaping, showed no signs of childbirth. So whose baby was in the cellar in 1988? Was it another victim? Or did Arthur bring a child into the cellar? A test subject? Henderson rips the headphones off. He needs to talk to Clara again. He drives to the safe house, the tires of his SUV tearing up the pavement. The sun is rising now, a bloody streak across the Texas horizon. The town of Red Creek is waking up to a new reality, one where their most prominent family is a dynasty of predators. When Henderson arrives at the motel, Clara is sitting by the window, watching the sunrise. She looks older than she did yesterday. The adrenaline is fading, leaving only the exhaustion of survival. Clara, Henderson starts sitting opposite her. We found another one. In Nevada. She's safe. Clara nods slowly, but her eyes don't leave the horizon. She won't thank you, Clara says quietly. Not yet. He gets inside your head. He paints over your memories. Henderson leans in. Clara, I need to ask you about 1988. I heard something on the tapes. A baby. Clara stiffens. Her hands grip the arms of the chair until her knuckles turn white. She closes her eyes, and a tear leaks out. I didn't want to tell you, she whispers. I didn't think you'd believe me. Tell me, Henderson urges. Who was the baby? He brought him down in a basket, Clara says, her voice trembling. A little boy, maybe 6 months old. He said the mother was unfit. He said he rescued him. Henderson's mind races. A kidnapping. A baby taken from a stroller or a car somewhere in 1988. What happened to the boy, Clara? I took care of him, she says, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. For a year, I named him Thomas. He was the only light in that hole. I taught him to walk on the concrete floor. She chokes back a sob. But then the deacon took him. He said Thomas was ready for the academy. He took him away. I never saw him again. The horror shifts shape again. It's not just women. It's children. The academy. Was that another bunker? Or was it a boarding school? Or Henderson freezes. He thinks of David Vance. David is 55. Thomas would be 32 or 33 today. Could Thomas be out there? Or did Arthur raise him? Did he raise a stolen child as his own? No, David was the biological son. The DNA proved that. So where did Thomas go? Henderson calls the station. Give me the missing children reports from 1987 and 1988. Radius of 500 miles. Look for a baby boy. Then he calls the team in Nevada. The woman, Lisa. Ask her if she was alone. Ask her if she ever saw a man. A younger man. Not David. Someone else. The agent in Nevada is on the line within minutes. Detective, it's strange you asked that. We're debriefing Lisa now. She keeps asking for the doctor. She says the doctor checks on her every Tuesday. Is the doctor David Vance? Henderson asks. No, the agent replies. She identified David's photo as the shepherd. She says the doctor is younger. She says he has a scar on his chin. A scar. Clara mentioned that Thomas fell once in the cellar. hit his chin on the bucket. A deep cut. Henderson feels the hair on his arms stand up. The baby from the cellar didn't die. He wasn't killed. He was raised. He was raised in the academy, whatever that was. And now, he is the doctor. He is the third head of the Hydra. The generation that was born in the dark. This changes everything. David Vance isn't the final boss. He's the middle management. The true horror is the child who was raised by a monster to be a perfect, unfeeling instrument of his sanctuary. And if he is the doctor, he is likely highly intelligent, mobile, and currently active. He isn't in a nursing home. He isn't in a jail cell. He is out there. Henderson walks back into the interrogation room with David Vance. The dynamic has shifted. Henderson is no longer hunting a suspect. He is hunting a network. Who is Thomas? Henderson drops the name like a grenade. David's eyes widen. Genuine shock registers for the first time. He didn't think they would find out about Thomas. Thomas is a success story. David sneers, recovering his composure. He is the proof that our method works. Pure, untainted by the world. Where is he, David? Henderson slams his hand on the table. He's checking on your victims, isn't he? He's the one running the expansion. David leans back, that superior smile returning. You can't catch him, detective. You look for criminals. Thomas isn't a criminal. He doesn't have a record. He doesn't have a past. He's a ghost. He walks among you, and you don't even see him. He could be your doctor. He could be your neighbor. The threat is palpable. A serial predator raised from infancy to believe his crimes are a moral imperative. A man with no legal identity, no fingerprints in the system, no connections to the outside world except the ones his family forged for him. We have his description, Henderson says, bluffing again. Scar on the chin. We'll find him. Good luck, David laughs. It's a dry, rattling sound. But you should know, Thomas isn't just a guardian. He's a cleaner. If he knows I'm here, if he knows the sanctuary is breached, his protocol is to sanitize. Sanitize? Henderson asks, dread pooling in his stomach. Delete the assets, David says coldly. Burn it down. All of it. Site B. Henderson shouts into his radio. Evacuate. Get Lisa out of there. Now. But even as he shouts, the agent in Nevada screams over the comms. Fire. We have fire. The structure is rigged. Incendiary devices in the walls. The line fills with the sounds of chaos, shouting, and the roar of flames. The sanctuary was built to self-destruct. The doctor has triggered the failsafe. Henderson stares at David Vance, who is humming a hymn under his breath. The investigation has just turned into a race against a fire that threatens to consume the evidence, the victims, and the truth. And somewhere, watching the smoke rise on a remote feed, is the baby from the cellar, grown into a man who burns the world to keep his secrets. The video feed from Nevada cut to static, but the audio remained for a few terrifying seconds. The roar of an inferno that sounded less like fire and more like a living, breathing beast consuming its prey. In the Texas Command Center, the silence was absolute. Detective Henderson stared at the blank screen, his reflection staring back, pale and haggard. Did they get her out? He barked, his voice cracking. Status on the victim. For an agonizing minute, there was only the hiss of white noise. Then a cough. A voice shouting over the crackle of flames. Asset secure. Repeat, Lisa is clear. But the structure is gone. It's all gone, Henderson. The drives, the papers. It's a total loss. David Vance, sitting in the interrogation room just 10 feet away, didn't need to hear the report to know what had happened. He could feel it. The vibration of destruction seemed to travel through the floorboards. He leaned back in his chair, the metal cuffs clinking against the table, and closed his eyes. It wasn't a gesture of prayer. It was a moment of satisfaction. The protocol had been executed. The sanctuary was purified by fire. Thomas is efficient, David murmured, opening his eyes to look at the one-way glass, as if he could see Henderson standing there. He doesn't leave crumbs. The investigation had just slammed into a wall of ash. Site B was a smoking crater. The physical evidence linking the Van Cess to a wider network was incinerated. But they still had the survivors. They had Clara, the matriarch of suffering, And now they had Lisa, the librarian from Phoenix who was currently being treated for smoke inhalation in a Las Vegas ambulance. And they had a name, Thomas, the baby in the basket, the boy in the cellar, the man who had just burned a warehouse to the ground with the push of a button. The hunt for Arthur Vance was over. The hunt for David Vance was a legal battle, but the hunt for Thomas was a race against a phantom. Henderson stormed back into the interrogation room. He didn't sit down. He loomed over David. You think burning the evidence saves you? Henderson hissed. It just adds arson and attempted murder of federal agents to your sheet. You're never seeing the sun again, David. David smiled, that infuriating, serene smile of the true believer. I don't mind the dark, detective. I grew up in it. But Thomas was born in it. He thrives in it. You're looking for a suspect. You should be looking for a shadow. Who is he? Henderson demanded. What is his legal name? Whose identity did you steal for him? Because that was the key. Thomas couldn't exist without paper. He needed a social security number, a driver's license, a medical license if he was indeed the doctor. David chuckled. We gave him many names. He is a man of many faces. Today he might be a plumber. Tomorrow a pilot. But his hands are always busy doing God's work. Henderson realized he was wasting time. David was enjoying the game. He needed to go back to the source. He needed Clara. He drove back to the safe house, his mind churning. The baby, 1988. If Thomas was 32 years old, he had been operating as an adult for over a decade. How many sanctuaries had he built? How many fires were waiting to be lit? When he arrived, Clara was pacing the small motel room. She had seen the news. The warehouse fire in Nevada was breaking on every channel. She knew. It was him, wasn't it? Clara asked, her voice trembling. Thomas. Henderson nodded. He triggered it remotely. Clara, I need you to think. You raised him for a year. You saw him grow up, even from a distance. You said he had a scar on his chin. What else? Did he have a limp? A speech impediment? A birthmark? Clara closed her eyes, traveling back to the darkest days of her life. No limp, she whispered. He was perfect. Arthur made sure of it. He exercised him. He made him read. He made him memorize things. What kind of things? Anatomy, Clara said, her eyes snapping open. Arthur gave him medical books. Old ones. Gray's Anatomy. Surgical guides. Thomas was obsessed with the human body. He used to dissect the rats we caught in the traps. He wasn't cruel about it. He was curious. He wanted to know how the machine worked. The chill in the room deepened. A budding sociopath, nurtured by a master manipulator, given a scalpel instead of a toy car. He wanted to fix things, Clara continued. He used to tell me, through the door, I can fix you, Clara. I can make you new. The doctor, Henderson muttered. It wasn't just a nickname. It was a vocation. Lisa said he wore scrubs, Henderson said. She said he checked her vitals. Clara, did he ever talk about a specific hospital? A city? Clara shook her head. No, but he liked the heat. He hated the cold cellar. He always said he wanted to go where the sun never turned off. The sun never turned off. The Southwest. Arizona. Nevada. New Mexico. Henderson called the FBI task force leader. Run a search. Medical professionals. Doctors, nurses, EMTs. Male. Early 30s. Chin scar. But don't just look for matches. Look for ghosts. Look for IDs that were issued to people who died as children. Look for stolen identities. It was a long shot, a needle in a stack of needles. But then, a break came from an unexpected direction. Lisa Thorne, recovering in a hospital, had been sedated, but before she went under, she mumbled something to the nurse. A detail she had fixated on during her years in the glass cage. The parking pass, the nurse reported to the agent stationed at the door. She said the doctor had a parking pass hanging from his rearview mirror. She saw it once when he parked the truck inside the warehouse to unload supplies. She said it was green, and it had a picture of a cactus. A green parking pass with a cactus. It was thin, but it was tangible. The analysts went to work. They scrubbed the parking permit designs of every hospital, clinic, and medical center in the Southwest. 3 hours later, a hit. Desert Valley General Hospital. Tucson, Arizona. Their staff parking permits were green with a stylized saguaro cactus logo. Henderson felt the adrenaline spike. Tucson. It fit the profile. The sun never turns off. He got on a plane. The investigation was moving at the speed of light now. By the time he landed in Tucson, the local PD had already pulled the HR records for Desert Valley General. They were looking for a male employee, roughly 32. They found 3 potential matches. One was an orderly, one was a cafeteria worker, and one was a resident surgeon, Dr. Lucas Gantry. Henderson looked at the ID photo on the screen. The man was handsome, clean-cut, with an intense, unblinking stare. And there, faint but visible under the harsh fluorescent lighting of the photo, was a thin white line on his chin. The scar. Dr. Lucas Gantry. Henderson read the file. Transferred from a program in Mexico. Impeccable references. Quiet. Keeps to himself. Wonderful with trauma patients. It was the perfect cover. A healer by day, a captor by night. A man who held life and death in his hands and decided he was God of both. "We take him to the hospital," the Tucson captain said. "He's on shift right now. ER rotation." It was a high-risk takedown. A crowded hospital. Innocent civilians everywhere. If Thomas was as dangerous as David claimed, he wouldn't go quietly. He might have a fail-safe on his own body. A vest. A weapon. Henderson nodded. Silent approach. We isolate him. No sirens. The team moved into the hospital like a virus, silent and invisible. Officers in plain clothes took positions at the exits. Henderson and a SWAT team, dressed as hospital security, moved toward the ER. They spotted him. He was standing at a nurse's station, reviewing a chart. He looked terrifyingly normal. He was joking with a nurse, a charming smile on his face. This was the boy raised in a dungeon. This was the cleaner. It was a testament to the human capacity for duality. He was a monster in a white coat. "Dr. Gantry," Henderson said, approaching from the side, his hand on his concealed weapon. "Can we have a word?" The man turned. His eyes met Henderson's. There was no shock, no panic, just a sudden, absolute stillness. The smile didn't fade. It just froze. He looked at Henderson, then at the security guards behind him. He did the math in a split second. "Is this about the patient in bed 4? Gantry asked smoothly, his voice calm, melodic. "The overdose?" "It's about the patient in Nevada," Henderson said. "It's about Lisa, and Clara, and the fire." The mask didn't slip. If anything, it hardened. "I see," Gantry said. "Well, that is a complication." He didn't run. He didn't reach for a gun. He did something worse. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a phone. He pressed a single button. "Code black," he whispered into the device. "Grab him," Henderson shouted. The team lunged. They tackled Gantry to the linoleum floor, sending charts flying. Handcuffs snapped onto his wrists. But Gantry was laughing. A low, breathless laugh as his face was pressed into the tile. "You're too late," he wheezed. "The network is decentralized. The signal is sent." "What signal?" Henderson demanded, hauling him up. "What did you just do?" "I initiated the harvest." Gantry smiled, blood from a split lip staining his teeth. Site B was just a storage facility. "You haven't found the nursery yet." "The nursery?" The word sucked the air out of the ER. Henderson felt a cold dread that went deeper than anything he had felt in the bunker. "Where is it?" he screamed, shaking the man. "Where are the children?" Gantry just stared at him, his eyes dead and empty like a shark's. "They are with the angels now. Unless you can drive very, very fast." They dragged him out of the hospital, the stunned staff watching in horror as their colleague was revealed as a demon. In the back of the squad car, they seized his phone. It was encrypted, locked down with military-grade security. But the message on the screen was still visible before it went black. Destination, purgatory. Execute. They raided his apartment. It was located in a quiet, upscale complex near the university. Inside, it was sterile, minimalist. No photos on the walls. No personal clutter. Just a bed, a laptop, and a wall of monitors. The monitors were black now, the feeds cut. But on the desk, neatly arranged, was a row of binders. Henderson opened one. It wasn't medical records. It was dossiers. Profiles of women. Profiles of couples. And profiles of infants. He's running a trafficking ring. One of the detectives said, horrified. He's selling them. No, Henderson said, reading the notes and the margins. The handwriting was precise, architectural. Subject A, unfit mother. Intervention required. Subject B, neglectful father. Extraction approved. He's not selling them. He's rescuing them, just like Arthur rescued him. Thomas Gantry, or whatever his real name was, believed he was a savior. He was kidnapping children from what he deemed bad homes and placing them. Where? In the nursery. Was it another bunker? Or was it a community? A cult compound? The phone buzzed in Henderson's hand. It was the tech team back in Texas. Detective, we cracked a partial on the phone's last transmission. It didn't go to a bomb. It went to a GPS tracker. Where? It's moving, the text said. It's on a highway, heading east, towards the New Mexico border. What is it? It's a vehicle, detective. A transport. The signal ID is registered to a medical transport company. Angel Wings Ambulance Service. Henderson realized the horror of Gantry's last words. Unless you could drive very, very fast. The nursery wasn't a place. It was a convoy. The children were being moved. They were mobile. And Gantry had just told the drivers to disappear. Get the state police on I-10. Henderson yelled. Look for an ambulance. Angel Wings. Shut down the highway. Shut down the whole damn state if you have to. As the sirens wailed into the Tucson night, Henderson looked back at the squad car where Gantry sat. The man was watching him through the window. He mouthed one word. Boom. And then, far to the east, on a lonely stretch of desert highway, a pillar of smoke began to rise. The Interstate 10 corridor, stretching east from Tucson, is a ribbon of asphalt cutting through a purgatory of scrub brush and heat haze. It is a place where distance distorts reality, where a vehicle can disappear into the shimmer of the horizon and simply cease to exist. But today, the highway is a theater of war. Detective Henderson is in the passenger seat of a lead Arizona State Trooper cruiser, the engine screaming at a pitch that vibrates in his teeth. The speedometer reads 110 miles per hour, yet the white box truck ahead, the Angel Wings ambulance, is refusing to yield. It weaves through the sparse afternoon traffic like a guided missile, its lights flashing not to warn, but to intimidate. This is not a medical emergency. It is a funeral procession moving at breakneck speed. He's not slowing down. The trooper yells, knuckles white on the wheel as the cruiser shudders over the expansion joints of a bridge. Dispatch, we are approaching the San Simon interchange. Target is driving aggressively, requesting permission to pit. Henderson grabs the radio handset, his voice raw. Negative. Absolutely negative. The cargo is children. If you flip that rig, you kill them. We have to box them in. We have to starve them of road. The order is a tactical nightmare. Stopping a 5-ton vehicle without force is like trying to catch a falling anvil with a pillow. But Gantry's threat echoes in Henderson's mind. Unless you can drive very, very fast. The doctor hadn't just dispatched the transport. He had likely given the driver a suicide order. If they can't escape, they don't let the assets be recovered. The chase crosses the county line. Helicopters have joined the fray, their rotors chopping the air above, broadcasting the high-speed drama to a horrified nation. The news cheerin' reads, ambulance chase, suspected trafficking ring. But Henderson knows it's worse than trafficking. It's a mobile cult. As the convoy approaches a construction zone where the highway narrows to one lane, the ambulance driver makes a move that stops Henderson's heart. The rig swerves toward the concrete barriers, aiming for the gap between the K-rail and a precipice dropping into a dry wash. He's going over, the trooper screams. He's trying to dump it. Block him, Henderson roars. The trooper slams the accelerator, pushing the cruiser into the narrow space between the ambulance and the edge. Metal screams against metal. Sparks shower the windshield like fireworks. The cruiser shudders violently, grinding against the heavy truck. It is a game of chicken played with thousands of pounds of steel. The ambulance driver, realizing the suicide turn is blocked, corrects hard to the left, smashing through a line of orange barrels. The heavy vehicle fishtails, tires smoking, swaying precariously on its suspension. For a terrifying second, it tilts, gravity debating with momentum, before slamming back down on all 6 wheels. The tires blow. Pop, pop. The sound is like gunfire. The rim grinds into the asphalt, throwing up a rooster tail of sparks. The ambulance lurches, drags, and finally screeches to a halt in a cloud of burning rubber and dust, sideways across the highway. Silence falls for a heartbeat, followed by the swarm. Cruisers skid to a halt, forming a defensive fan. Weapons are drawn. Driver, exit the vehicle. Hands in the air. Henderson kicks his door open, his weapon raised, rushing toward the cab. The dust is still settling, choking the air. Through the shattered side window of the ambulance, he sees movement. The driver. It's not a man. It's a woman. She is wearing a pristine white nurse's uniform, stark against the chaos. She isn't panicking. She isn't crying. She is reaching for something under the dashboard. Don't do it! Henderson screams, sprinting the last 10 yards. Show me your hands. The woman looks at him. Her face is serene, possessing the same terrifying calm as Lisa in the warehouse, as Gantry in the hospital. She smiles, a beatific motherly smile. The angels are sleeping, she whispers, her voice barely audible over the sirens. Hush now. She pulls a lever. Henderson dives. He doesn't know if it's a bomb, a fuel dump, or a release mechanism. He hits the ground as a hiss of gas erupts from the vehicle. But it's not an explosion. It's halon, fire suppression, or anesthesia. The gas vents around the cab. The woman slumps forward over the steering wheel, a syringe visible in her other hand. She has dosed herself. Suicide by sedative. Henderson scrambles up, ignoring the woman. He runs to the back doors of the ambulance. They are locked. Heavy industrial locks. Breaching tools. Get the Halligan, he shouts. A trooper runs up with a pry bar. They jam it into the gap. They heave. The metal groans, bending. With a crack that echoes like a gunshot, the doors fly open. Henderson braces himself for carnage. He braces himself for silence. He braces himself for the smell of death. But what he sees stops him cold. The interior of the ambulance is a spaceship. It is lined with soundproofing foam, lit by soft, amber mood lighting. The air is cool, climate-controlled to a perfect 70 degrees. And lining the walls are 6 pods. Not cages, not crates. High-tech medical-grade sleep pods, like something out of a sci-fi movie. Inside each pod, curled up under a soft white blanket, is a child. They range in age from toddlers to maybe 5 years old. They are motionless. Medics, Henderson yells, his voice cracking with panic. Check them. Are they breathing? The SWAT medics push past him. They open the first pod. A little girl, thumb in her mouth. The medic checks for a pulse. A pause that stretches for 1,000 years. Then, pulse is strong. Respiration slow. She's sedated. Heavily sedated. Check the next one. Pulse stable. Pulse stable. They're all alive, detective. They're just under. Henderson leans against the open door of the ambulance, his legs giving way. He slides down to the asphalt, the adrenaline crash hitting him like a physical blow. 6 children, 6 stolen lives, packaged like cargo, being driven into oblivion by a woman who chose death over surrender. He looks at the driver's cab. The paramedics are pulling the woman out, working on her. She's gone, one of them says. Cardiac arrest. Whatever was in that syringe, it was fast. The nanny is dead. Gantry is in cuffs. David is in a cell. The network is headless. But as the scene is secured and the children are carefully transferred to waiting ambulances, real ones this time, Henderson spots something taped to the inside of the ambulance door. A clipboard. It's a manifest, a delivery schedule. He pulls it off the metal. He reads it. Shipment 402. Origin, Tucson, Arizona. Destination, the ranch. Recipient, Father John. The ranch. Father John. The relief evaporates instantly. The ambulance wasn't heading to a disposal site. It was heading to a destination. A final destination. And Father John. That wasn't Arthur Vance. Arthur was the deacon. David was the heir. Thomas was the doctor. Who was Father John? Henderson pulls out his phone. He calls the analyst team in Texas. I need a location. Search for any property. any religious compound, any ranch in New Mexico or West Texas associated with a Father John or a John Vance or anyone connected to Arthur's past. Detective, the analyst, says, we're already digging into Gantry's finances. We found a recurring payment, rent, for satellite phone. Triangulate it. We did. It's pinging right now. It's not in a city. It's in the Gila wilderness, deep in the mountains. No roads, just a private airstrip. The Gila wilderness. Hundreds of thousands of acres of rugged, unforgiving terrain. The perfect place to hide a kingdom. The ranch wasn't just a house. It was a fortress. And Father John was waiting for a delivery that was never going to arrive. Does he know? Henderson asks. Does Father John know the shipment has been intercepted? If he has a police scanner, he knows. If he's watching the news, he knows. Then he's going to run, Henderson says. Or he's going to fight. He walks over to the body of the driver, now covered by a yellow sheet. He bends down and picks up the syringe she dropped. It's a custom mix, but it's the label on the vial that catches his eye. A symbol, a brand, a circle with a cross inside, but the cross is inverted, the arms broken. It looks like a rune. It looks like a sigil. He snaps a picture of it and sends it to Sheriff Gonzalez back in Red Creek. Do you recognize this symbol? A minute later, his phone rings. Henderson, Gonzalez says, her voice tight. That symbol. We found it carved into the beam in the old barn ruins, where the bunker was. But we also found it. We found it in the church archives. The church. The First Baptist Church of Red Creek, where Arthur Vance was a deacon. I just spoke to the old pastor. He said Arthur wasn't just a member. In the late 70s, he led a splinter group, a Bible study that met in secret. They called themselves the Order of the Broken Cross. They were kicked out for heresy. They believed that salvation required purification through suffering. The pieces slammed together. It wasn't just a family of psychopaths. It was a cult, a religious sect born in a small Texas town, exiled, and then mutated into a multi-generational criminal enterprise. Father John wasn't a relative. He was the spiritual leader, the one Arthur bowed to, the one who sanctioned the sanctuaries. Who was the leader of the group? Henderson asks. Who is John? The pastor said his name was John Lazarus, Gonzalez replies. But he died in 1985. Car accident. He didn't die, Henderson says, looking at the manifest. He went underground. He went to the wilderness. He's been building his version of heaven for 30 years. Henderson looks up at the mountains looming in the east, purple and jagged against the twilight. Somewhere up there, an old man is waiting for his children. An old man who thinks he is God. And he has likely surrounded himself with a legion of Thomas Gantrys, children he raised from the 80s, 90s, and aughts. An army of true believers. We need the National Guard, Henderson says to the state trooper captain. We're not going to a ranch. We're going to war. The map of New Mexico has blank spots, places where the contour lines of the topographic charts squeeze together so tightly they form a wall of ink. The Gila wilderness is one of these voids. It is a fortress of geology, a sanctuary of stone and pine, where the modern world is stripped away mile by treacherous mile. At dawn, the silence of this cathedral of nature is shattered not by birdsong, but by the thumping rotor blades of 3 Black Hawk helicopters banking low over the canopy. Below them, a convoy of armored troop carriers grinds up a logging road that officially doesn't exist. This is no longer a police raid. This is an invasion. The FBI, the state police, and units of the National Guard are moving to besiege a kingdom that has hidden in the blind spot of America for 30 years. Operation Jericho has begun. Detective Henderson sits in the lead-armored vehicle, the vibration rattling his teeth. He checks his vest. He checks his weapon. But his mind is on the enemy. He isn't afraid of the Father John figure. He is terrified of the soldiers. If Thomas Gantry, the doctor, was any indication, they are walking into a meat grinder staffed by the very victims they are trying to save. These aren't criminals in the traditional sense. They are children of the corn, raised in isolation, indoctrinated to believe that the outside world is the apocalypse and that the police are the demons come to drag them to hell. Rules of engagement are strict. The tactical commander's voice crackles in the headset. Hostiles are likely brainwashed civilians. Do not fire unless fired upon. Aim to incapacitate. We are here to rescue, not to massacre. It is a noble order, but Henderson wonders if it is a suicide pact. The road ends. The convoy halts. Ahead, across a narrow suspension bridge spanning a deep gorge, lies the ranch. It is breathtakingly disturbing. It doesn't look like a compound of evil. It looks like paradise. Terrace gardens cascade down the mountainside. Solar panels glint in the sun like dragon scales. A white chapel with a soaring steeple dominates the center, surrounded by neat rows of cabins. It is a utopia built on the backs of the stolen. And standing on the bridge, blocking the only entrance, is a line of young men and women. They are dressed in white. They are unarmed, or so it seems. They stand hand in hand, a human chain of innocence. Negotiator up, the commander orders. A specialized agent steps forward with a megaphone. This is the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We have a warrant for the arrest of John Lazarus and the recovery of missing persons. Disperse immediately. The voice echoes off the canyon walls. The line of white-clad figures doesn't flinch. They start to sing. A hymn. Amazing Grace. The sound is ethereal, haunting, drifting across the chasm. It is psychological warfare. How do you storm a bridge held by a choir? Then the trap springs. It isn't the people on the bridge. It's the sniper in the bell tower of the chapel. A single crack of a high-powered rifle echoes. The negotiator drops, a red bloom expanding on his shoulder. Sniper, take cover. Chaos erupts. The singing stops, replaced by the mechanical thwack, thwack, thwack of automatic fire from the tree line. The innocent chain on the bridge scatters, revealing they were bait. From the cabins, figures emerge, not in white but in tactical gear. They move with the precision of special forces. These are the graduates of the academy. They flank the law enforcement positions, laying down suppressing fire that pins the convoy against the cliff face. Return fire. Return fire. The canyon turns into a kill box. Henderson is crouched behind the wheel of the carrier, glass shattering above him. He sees a young woman, no older than 20, advancing with an assault rifle. Her face is a mask of holy fury. She isn't shooting to escape. She is shooting to defend her heaven. Henderson aims, his finger trembling on the trigger. He shoots the ground in front of her. She doesn't stop. She raises her weapon. A sniper from the police team takes the shot. She falls. Henderson feels a sickness in his gut that has nothing to do with fear. They are killing the hostages to get to the kidnapper. The battle rages for an hour. It is a stalemate of attrition. But the numbers are on the side of the law. The Blackhawks swoop in, fast-roping tactical teams onto the roof of the main compound, bypassing the bridge. Flashbangs detonate inside the chapel. The resistance begins to crumble, not from lack of will, but from lack of ammunition. The soldiers of the Broken Cross are subdued, zip-tied, screaming scriptures at their captors. You are the fire. You are the end times, one boy screams as he is dragged away. He has the same scar on his chin as Thomas Gantry, a mark of the beast, or a mark of the medical practice in the cellar. Henderson pushes forward with the breach team. They kick down the doors of the main house. It is a museum of opulence. Persian rugs, oil paintings, a library filled with first editions. It is the palace of a king. They sweep the rooms. Empty, empty. He's in the sanctuary. A captured acolyte spits at them. He is waiting for the rapture. They move to the chapel. The double doors are carved with scenes of the flood, Noah's Arkansas. The irony is thick. They push the doors open. The interior is bathed in golden light, streaming through stained glass windows. And there, sitting on a simple wooden throne at the altar, is Father John. He is ancient, perhaps 90 years old. His skin is translucent, his hair a wispy cloud. He is hooked up to an oxygen tank, the hiss-click of the machine, the only sound in the vast room. He holds a Bible in his lap. He doesn't look like a warlord. He looks like a saint on his deathbed. Come in, detective. His voice is a dry rasp, amplified by the acoustics of the room. I've been expecting you since 1980. Henderson advances, weapon raised. John Lazarus. You are under arrest. Lazarus smiles. It is a smile of infinite condescension. You cannot arrest an idea, detective. You can burn the church, but the faith remains. He gestures around him. Do you see what I built? A world without pain. A world without sin. I took the broken things of your world, the unwanted children, the battered women, and I made them whole. I gave them purpose. You gave them slavery. Henderson shouts, stepping onto the dais. You stole their lives. I saved their souls. Lazarus roars, a sudden burst of energy surging through his frail frame. Arthur, poor, weak Arthur. He was a blunt instrument. He saw the flesh. I saw the spirit. The cellars were necessary. The fire is necessary to forge the steel. He looks at Henderson with milky, cataract-clouded eyes. And now, you have brought the world to my doorstep. You have contaminated the garden. Where are the others? Henderson demands. The network. We know about the ambulance. We know about Site B. How many are there? Lazarus laughs. A wheezing, rattling sound. You think this is it? You think this ranch is the extent of my work? He leans forward. Detective, I've been planting seeds for 40 years. My children are everywhere. They're in your hospitals. They're in your schools. They're in your police departments. You arrested Thomas. You arrested David. But you cannot arrest the harvest. It is already in the silo. He reaches into his robe. Gun, a SWAT officer screams. But Lazarus doesn't pull a gun. He pulls a remote. A dead man's switch. I told you, Lazarus whispers. Purification through fire. Don't do it. Henderson lunges. Lazarus presses the button. Nothing happens. Lazarus presses it again. Frantically, the serene mask cracks. Panic floods his eyes. Why? Why is the fire not? Because we jammed the signal. A voice comes from the doorway. A tech agent stands there, holding a signal disruptor. We cut your frequency the minute the birds were in the air, John. Your bombs are duds. Your rapture is canceled. For the first time, the god of the Gila wilderness looks human. He looks small. He looks defeated. The myth evaporates. He is just an old man in a chair. Henderson holsters his weapon and pulls out the cuffs. He walks up to the throne. John Lazarus, for the crimes of kidnapping, murder, and crimes against humanity, you are under arrest. He snaps the steel around the thin, bird-like wrists. As they drag him out of the chapel, past the rows of his weeping, zip-tied children, Lazarus stops. He looks at Henderson. You think you won, but you haven't asked the right question. What question? Henderson asks, pausing. You found Clara. Lazarus sneers. You found the girl in the grave. You found the babies. But did you ever ask Arthur why he started? Did you ever ask him about the first one? Sarah Jenkins, Henderson says. 1979. No. Lazarus shakes his head, a wicked glint returning to his eye. Before Sarah. Before the trucks. Before the cellars. Go back to the beginning, detective. Go back to 1960. Go back to the hospital where Arthur worked as a janitor. Ask him about the nurse. Henderson freezes. 1960, 20 years before Clara. What nurse? The one who laughed at him, Lazarus whispers. The one who started the fire in his mind. I didn't create the monster, detective. I just gave him a Bible. The monster was born in the maternity ward. He is shoved into the armored vehicle, leaving Henderson standing in the dust of the paradise. The raid is over. The compound is secured. But the words hang in the air like smoke. The maternity ward. 1960. Henderson pulls out his phone. He calls a researcher in Texas. I need a deep dive. Arthur Vance. Employment history. 1960. Look for a hospital. And look for a nurse. A nurse who went missing or died. The analyst types furiously on the other end. I'm looking. Okay, here it is. Arthur Vance worked as a custodian at St. Mary's Hospital in Odessa, Texas, 1959 to 1961. Any incidents? Nothing criminal. But there's a note here in the hospital archives. A dismissal. He was fired for inappropriate conduct regarding the staff. Is there a name? The complaint was filed by a head nurse. Her name was... Wait a minute. The analyst's voice drops. Her name was Margaret Miller. Henderson feels the world tilt on its axis. Margaret Miller, Clara's mother. Henderson asks, his voice barely a whisper. Yes, Clara's mother. She was a nurse at St. Mary's in 1960, before Clara was born. The realization hits Henderson with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't random. Clara wasn't just a girl on the side of the road. She was the daughter of the woman who rejected him. This wasn't just a serial killer satisfying an urge. This was a 20-year grudge, a vendetta incubated in silence. Arthur Vance hadn't just taken Clara. He had taken Margaret's daughter to punish Margaret. He had kept Clara alive not out of mercy, but as a living trophy of his revenge against her mother. And John Lazarus knew. He knew the origin story. "Give me a chopper," Henderson yells to the pilot. "I need to get back to Red Creek. I need to talk to Arthur Vance. I need to look him in the eye and tell him I know about Margaret." But as the helicopter lifts off, banking away from the ruins of the cult, a notification pops up on Henderson's phone. A news alert. Breaking news. Arson at County Hospital. Secure ward evacuated. The hospital where Arthur Vance is being held. Henderson stares at the screen. "No," he breathes. "No, no, no. Thomas Gantry is in custody. John Lazarus is in custody. David Vance is in custody. Who lit the fire? Unless Lazarus was right. The harvest is already in the silo. Unless there is one more. One child who wasn't at the ranch. One who was assigned to watch over the father himself. The cold case isn't just reversed. It is burning down." The text message on Detective Henderson's phone glows like a radioactive warning in the dawn light of the West Texas plains. She is the keeper of the keys. The photo attached is grainy, a Polaroid from the mid-'70s, faded to sepia tones. It shows the Vance family at a picnic. Arthur, looking stern and proud. His late wife, a shadow in the background. David, a teenager with a cruel smirk. And there, standing slightly apart, almost blending into the treeline, is a girl. She is perhaps 12 years old. She is staring directly at the camera with an intensity that makes Henderson flinch. She looks like a porcelain doll that has been dropped and glued back together wrong. This is the ghost in the machine. The variable that never appeared in any database, any school registry, any birth certificate. Arthur Vance didn't just hide his victims. He hid his own blood. "Sheriff," Henderson calls out, his voice cutting through the wind that is still scattering the ashes of Margaret Miller. "We need to run a facial recognition on this girl. Age progress it. She'd be in her mid-50s now." Gonzalez looks at the photo, her brow furrowing. Vance only had one son, David. It's in the probate records. It's in the census. He erased her, Henderson says, the realization chilling him more than the desert morning air. Or he never registered her. A home birth. Homeschooled. Kept off the grid. The perfect failsafe. If the men fall, the woman remains. The convoy leaves the wind farm, abandoning the body of the angel to the coroner. The victory of capturing Arthur feels hollow now. They cut off the head of the snake, but the tail is still thrashing, and it might be the deadliest part. As they speed back toward Red Creek, the tech team works miracles with the grainy image. They strip away the blur, map the bone structure, and run it through the DMV, passport controls, and social media. Nothing. No match. She doesn't exist. She has to have a name, Henderson mutters, pacing in the back of the command van. Clara said she heard singing. A woman's voice. The matron. He dials Clara again. Clara, the singing. What did she sing? Was it hymns? Was it pop music? Lullabies, Clara whispers, her voice thick with exhaustion. Old ones. Mockingbird. Rockabye baby. But she changed the words. She made them. Scary. Down will come baby, cradle and all. Into the dark, into the wall. Into the wall. The text said the house you missed, Henderson says to Gonzalez. We raided the mansion. We raided the farmhouse ruins. What's left? Gonzalez pulls up the property tax map of Red Creek. Vance owned a lot of commercial real estate. Strip malls. The old cinema. But residential. Just the mansion and the ranch. She scrolls, zooming in. Wait, there's a trust property. It's not listed under Vance. It's listed under Martha V. Trusted. Martha, Henderson says. That was his mother's name. Where is it? It's an historic district, Gonzalez says, surprised. Right in the middle of town. 404 Elm Street. It's an old Victorian. I thought it was abandoned. Boarded up for years. It's not abandoned, Henderson says, loading his weapon. It's a nest. The sirens remain off as they approach Elm Street. This is a residential neighborhood, quiet, lined with oak trees. 404 Elm stands like a rotten tooth in a perfect smile. The paint is peeling, gray wood exposed like bone. The windows are boarded with plywood. The yard is overgrown with kudzu, a green blanket choking the life out of the porch. It looks like the classic haunted house every town has, the one kids dare each other to touch. But the horror inside isn't supernatural. It is administrative. It is the hub. Perimeter, Henderson whispers. Silent approach. She's the keeper. That means she has access. If there are other holding sites, the locations are in there. They creep through the tall grass. The front door is nailed shut. They move to the back. A cellar door. Of course. It's always a cellar. Henderson signals the breach team. They use bolt cutters on the padlock. It snaps with a dull clunk. The door creaks open, revealing steps plunging into gloom. Henderson goes first, flashlight mounted on his weapon. The air is stale, smelling of old paper and lavender. Not rot. Lavender. It's the smell of a grandmother's house. At the bottom of the stairs, they find a basement that spans the entire footprint of the house. But it's not a dungeon. It's an office. Rows of filing cabinets line the walls. A desk sits in the center, neat and orderly. A computer hums on the desk, an old tower model, disconnected from the internet. And, sitting in the chair, facing away from them, is a figure. A woman. She is wearing a floral dress, her graying hair pinned up in a severe bun. She is knitting. The click-clack of the needles is the only sound in the room. Police. Hands where I can see them. Henderson shouts, the beam of light hitting her back. The woman doesn't jump. She doesn't freeze. She simply turns the chair slowly. Her face is the face from the Polaroid, aged by 40 years of shadows. Her eyes are large, watery, and terrifyingly blank. She smiles. You're late, she says, her voice soft, melodic. The tea is cold. Stand up, Henderson commands. Name. I'm Sarah, she says. Not the dead one. The living one. Sarah Vance. Arthur's daughter, Henderson says. His conscience, she corrects. She puts the knitting down. It's a baby blanket. Small. For a newborn. You took my father. You took my brother. You took my nephew. You are very thorough, detective, but you don't understand the filing system. What filing system? Henderson steps closer, checking for traps. She gestures to the cabinets. The archive. Every soul we saved. Every child we placed. It's all here. Hard copies. The cloud burns, detective, but paper. Paper remembers. Henderson looks at the cabinets. There are hundreds of files. Decades of crimes documented with bureaucratic precision. You ran the logistics, he realizes. Arthur was the visionary. David was the enforcer. Thomas was the cleaner. But you were the brain. I'm a librarian, Sarah says proudly. I kept track of the inventory. I made sure they were fed. I made sure they were educated. Where are the others? Henderson demands. Are there more bunkers? Sarah laughs. It's a girlish, giggling sound that makes Henderson's skin crawl. Oh, detective, the world is a bunker. We just provide the locks. She leans forward. But you should check the attic. That's where I keep the special ones. Attic. Henderson signals the team. 2 men on her. Cuff her. The rest of you, upstairs. Now. They drag Sarah out of the chair. She doesn't resist. She just hums that lullaby. Down will come baby. Henderson sprints up the basement stairs, through the dusty, furniture-draped ground floor, and up the main staircase. The house groans under the weight of the boots. They reach the second floor. A narrow door leads to the attic. It is padlocked from the outside. Heavy steel bars. This isn't storage. It's a cell. Cut it, Henderson yells. The sparks fly again. The door is kicked open. The attic is hot, stifling. Sunlight filters through cracks in the boarded windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The room is divided into cubicles by hanging sheets. It looks like a makeshift hospital ward. Henderson pulls back the first sheet. A crib. Empty. He pulls back the second sheet. A bed. Empty. Panic rises. She said the special ones. Where are they? Then, from the far corner, a sound. A whimper. Henderson rushes over. Behind a wall of old trunks, huddled in the darkest corner, is a young woman. She is chained to a radiator. She is filthy, her eyes wild with fear. And in her arms, she is clutching a bundle of rags. It's okay, Henderson says, lowering his weapon. I'm the police. You're safe. The woman recoils, hugging the bundle tighter. No, she croaks. The matron. She'll take him. She said she'd take him to the silo. The matron is gone, Henderson says gently. She can't hurt you. He looks at the bundle. Is that a baby? The woman nods. She pulls back the rags. A tiny face, red and squalling, peers out. A newborn, maybe days old. Who are you? Henderson asks. I'm Jessica, she whispers. I was hiking in 2018. 2 years. She's been in this attic for 2 years. And she gave birth here. Are there others? Henderson asks. They took them. Jessica sobs. Yesterday, a man came. He took the other 2 girls. He said they were going to the ranch. Henderson closes his eyes. The ranch. They raided it. But the timeline. If they were moved yesterday, they might have arrived before the raid. Or they might have been intercepted by the ambulance. We have them, Henderson says, a wave of relief washing over him. The ambulance. We stopped it. They're safe. Jessica, your friends are safe. He calls for the medics. As they cut the chain and lead Jessica and her baby out of the darkness, Henderson walks to the window. He pries off a board. The light of Red Creek floods in. The town looks the same as it did yesterday. The church steeple, the water tower, the high school football field. But underneath the skin of normalcy, the cancer has been excised. He goes back down to the basement. Sarah Vance is cuffed to the desk. She is watching the police box up her life's work. The archive. It will take years to go through it. Every file is a missing person case solved. Every file is a family that will finally get an answer, even if the answer is a tragedy. You lost, Henderson says to her. It's over. The family line ends today. Sarah looks at him. The blankness in her eyes shifts, revealing a deep, cavernous sorrow. You think you ended it, she whispers. But you can't kill a seed, detective. You can only bury it. What does that mean? Thomas wasn't the only student, she says, a sly smile returning. We have a scholarship program. Henderson stares at her. A bluff? Or the truth? With this family, paranoia is the only survival strategy. Give me the names, Sarah. Give me the list. It's in the files, she says, nodding to a box being carried out. File 88. Look for the valedictorian. Henderson grabs the box. He rifles through it. File 88. He opens it. It's empty. There's only a sticky note. Graduated, 2015. Assignment, Quantico. Quantico, the FBI Academy. Henderson feels the blood drain from his face. The valedictorian. A mole. Inside the bureau. Someone trained by the Van Cess. Placed inside the very system meant to hunt them. He pulls out his phone. He needs to call the director. He needs to lock down the task force. He needs to. His phone screen goes black. A single message appears. White text on black. Class dismissed. The lights in the basement flicker and die. Complete darkness. The darkness in the basement of 404 Elm Street is absolute. A heavy, velvet shroud that tastes of dust and old secrets. In the sudden silence of the electronic blackout, the only sound is the rhythmic clink-clink of Sarah Vance's handcuffs against the metal desk and the soft, rhythmic tapping of her foot. Henderson stands frozen, his heart a drum in his chest, the dead weight of his phone a useless brick in his hand. Quantico. The word is a poison. If the valedictorian is real, if the Van Cess managed to plant a sleeper agent within the very heartbeat of federal law enforcement, then every move they've made, every raid they've conducted, has been monitored by the enemy. The hunter hasn't just been hunting. The hunter has been led. Who is it, Sarah? Henderson's voice is a low snarl in the dark. He fumbles for his tactical light, the beam cutting through the gloom, white and harsh. It lands on Sarah's face. She isn't smiling anymore. She looks peaceful, her head tilted, as if listening to music only she can hear. "The brightest stars are the ones you never see, detective," she whispers. "They blend into the light. They're the ones who file your reports, the ones who run your DNA, the ones who keep the world spinning while you play at justice." Suddenly, the silence is shattered by the scream of a siren. Not a police siren, but the town's old air raid horn, a relic of the Cold War mounted on the water tower. It moans across Red Creek, a mournful, rising and falling wail that signals disaster. Then, the radio on Henderson's shoulder crackles to life, the signal distorted by a massive surge of electromagnetic interference. "Henderson, do you copy? The transport from the ranch. It's gone." The driver. He wasn't a marshal. He was. The transmission dissolves into a screech of static. The realization hits Henderson like a physical blow to the stomach. The valedictorian wasn't just a mole in an office. They were on the ground. They were the one in the uniform, the one they trusted to carry the survivors to safety. The Van Cess didn't just have a sanctuary. They had an extraction plan. While the police were busy celebrating the raid on the Gila wilderness, the enemy was driving the evidence right out the front gate. Henderson sprints for the stairs, his boots echoing through the hollow Victorian house. He bursts out into the sunlight of Elm Street, but the world is turned upside down. The sky over Red Creek is thick with black smoke. The county hospital, the site of the earlier fire, is now a towering pillar of flame. The streetlights are flickering, popping like flashbulbs. People are emerging from their homes, faces pale with confusion, looking toward the horizon where the paradise was supposed to be. He sees Sheriff Gonzalez standing by her cruiser, staring at her own radio in disbelief. "They took them," she says, her voice trembling. "The children from the ambulance. The survivors from the ranch. The transport vanished on the back roads. They found the real marshals in a ditch, 2 miles from the perimeter. They were executed. The victory has been snatched away. The monster has been captured, but the lineage has escaped. Arthur, David, and Sarah are in chains, but the valedictorian and the next generation are gone, disappearing into the vast, empty veins of the American highway system. They're the seeds Sarah spoke of, buried in the dark, waiting for a new season." Henderson walks toward the police line, his shadow long in the setting sun. He looks back at the dead victim who started it all, Clara Miller. She is sitting in the back of a medical van, wrapped in a gray blanket. She is watching the smoke rise over her hometown. She isn't crying. She has seen the end of the world before. She knows that for some, there is no such thing as after. There is only the long, cold during. He approaches her, the weight of his failure heavy on his shoulders. "Clara," he says, his voice breaking. "I'm sorry. We lost the trail." Clara looks at him, her eyes ancient and wise. She reaches out a trembling hand and touches the badge on his chest. "You didn't lose, detective," she says softly. "You brought me back. For 40 years, I was a ghost. Today, I am a woman again. The others, they have their own journey now. But the bell has been rung. The secret is out. They can never be invisible again." The impact of the case ripples outward, far beyond the borders of Red Creek. In the weeks that follow, the archive found in the basement of 404 Elm Street begins to yield its harvest. Hundreds of missing persons cases are reopened. Families across 40 states receive calls they never thought would come. Some with the news of a body identified, others with the haunting possibility of a child still out there, raised in the shadow of the broken cross. The Vance family trial becomes the trial of the century, a grotesque parade of evidence that exposes the cracks in the American dream. Arthur Vance dies in his cell before the verdict, taking his final secrets to a grave that, this time, will not be empty. David and Sarah are sentenced to life without parole, their voices silenced by the steel and stone they once used to imprison others. But the mystery of the valedictorian remains. The FBI agent who disappeared the night of the raid, a young, decorated analyst named Marcus Thorne, is never found. His desk is found empty, his files wiped. He is the ghost that haunts the bureau, a reminder that the enemy isn't always at the gate. Sometimes he is the one holding the keys. The town of Red Creek tries to heal, but the ground feels different now. Every storm cellar is a question mark. Every quiet neighbor is a suspicion. The community is bonded by a collective trauma, a shared memory of the year the dead girl walked home. A memorial is built in the town square, not a statue of a hero, but a simple bell made of iron. It is rung once a year, on June 14th, at 2 in the morning. Clara Miller lives in a small house on the edge of town. She grows yellow roses in her garden. She doesn't like the dark, and she keeps the lights on until the sun comes up. Sometimes, she stands at her gate and watches the trucks go by on the highway, their headlights cutting through the Texas night. She isn't looking for a yellow Nova. She is looking at the people in the cabs, wondering who they are, where they are going, and what secrets they are carrying in the silent spaces between the heartbeats of the world. The case is closed, yet remains wide open. It is a haunting melody that never quite resolves, a cinematic tragedy that plays on in the minds of those who lived it. The dead victim returned, and in doing so, she dragged the truth into the light. But as the sun sets over the Gila wilderness and the shadows stretch long across the scrubland, we are left with the chilling realization. The Vance family didn't just build dungeons. They built a legacy, and somewhere in a quiet suburb, in a busy hospital, or in the halls of power, a student is graduating. The lesson is finished. The harvest continues. The screen fades to black, but the sound of the Red Creek bell lingers, a steady, rhythmic tolling that echoes through the silence. A warning, a memory, a ghost. The sirens have long since faded into the hum of the wind, and the satellite trucks have moved on to the next tragedy, the next viral sensation, leaving Red Creek to grapple with a silence that is heavier than any noise. It is 5 years after the return of Clara Miller. 5 years since the world learned that a tombstone can be a lie and a neighbor can be a nightmare. The Vance case is now a staple of true crime documentaries and law school textbooks, a cautionary tale about the limits of forensic science and the terrifying power of institutionalized madness. But for those who walked through the fire, the story didn't end with a gavel or a headline. It lives on in the quiet corners of the night, in the way a door is locked, and in the faces of the children who were recovered, and the ones who were not. Detective Henderson is no longer a detective. He retired 6 months after the raid on the Gila wilderness, the weight of the valedictorian mystery finally snapping the string of his career. He spent his days on a small porch in a town 3 counties away, a town where nobody knows his name and the only archives are the ones in his own mind. He still has the photo of the angel on his wall, a reminder of the one who didn't make it, and the empty file 88, a reminder of the one who got away. He knows that Marcus Thorne, or whoever the valedictorian truly was, is still out there, a phantom thread woven into the fabric of the country. Every time he hears of a strange disappearance or a miraculous recovery of a child in a remote area, he wonders if the sanctuary has simply rebranded, moved its offices from a Texas basement to a glass tower in a city that never sleeps. In Red Creek, the Victorian house on Elm Street was demolished by the city. They didn't just tear it down. They ground the wood into mulch and hauled the soil away as if the very ground was infected. Today, it is a small park, a patch of grass and a single oak tree. There's no plaque. The town wants to forget, but the geography of the street won't let them. People walk a little faster when they pass the empty lot, their eyes darting to the place where the cellar door used to be, listening for the faint, impossible sound of a lullaby rising from the dirt. The church where Arthur and David Vance once held sway has seen its congregation dwindle to a handful of the elderly. The stained glass is gone, replaced by clear windows, as if the new pastor is trying to let in as much light as humanly possible to bleach out the stains of the past. Clara Miller remains the living center of the mystery. She is 64 now, her hair a silver crown, her hands steady as she tends to her yellow roses. She is not a victim anymore. She is a witness. She spends her weekends traveling to speak at conventions for families of the missing, her voice a beacon for those who are still trapped in the before. She tells them that the light is coming, but she also tells them the truth, that the light doesn't fix everything. It just shows you where the cracks are. She and Jessica, the woman rescued from the attic, have formed a bond that transcends family. Jessica's son, the baby born in the dark, is 5 years old now. He loves the sun. He runs through the sprinklers in Clara's yard, his laughter a sharp, bright needle piercing the heavy memory of the Victorian attic. They call him Leo, a name that means lion, because he survived the den. But the most haunting part of the legacy is the archives. The thousands of files recovered from Sarah Vance's basement are still being processed by a specialized FBI task force. Every few months, a phone rings in a house in Ohio, or Oregon, or Maine. A mother is told that the daughter who vanished in 1992 was living as a domestic in a compound in Idaho. A father is told that his son, missing since 2005, was graduated to a training facility that was burned to the ground before the police arrived. The Vance network was a sprawling, subterranean empire, a shadow America that operated in parallel to the real one. For every Clara Miller they brought back, there are 10 others whose files end in a question mark, whose names were erased by the librarian before she was taken into custody. Sarah Vance died in prison 3 years into her sentence. She never gave up the list of scholarship students. On her deathbed, she told the chaplain that she was just a bookkeeper for a library that would never close. Her brother, David, remains in solitary confinement, a man who still believes he is a saint, spending his days writing sermons on the walls of his cell with the stub of a pencil. He asks for updates on the harvest, as if he is waiting for a report from a regional manager. He is a king without a country, but he smiles at the guards with a terrifying certainty that his kingdom is still growing just out of sight. As for the doctor, Thomas Gantry, the trail went cold after the fire in Tucson. There are rumors, unconfirmed sightings of a man with a scar on his chin working in disaster zones, in refugee camps, in places where the chaos is high and the oversight is low. A man who heals the body while he studies the soul. He is the ultimate predator, the one who believes his prey is a patient. He is the legacy of Arthur Vance's janitorial grudge, a virus that has mutated and become resistant to the cure. The Texas sun sets over the horizon, casting the long, jagged shadows of the oil derricks across the plains. These silhouettes look like giants walking through the dusk, much like the figures in this story, larger than life, terrifying, and impossible to pin down. The 1980 cold case wasn't just reversed, it was shattered, and the pieces are still falling. We look at the yellow Nova in the Museum of Crime, a relic of an era of innocence that never truly existed. We look at the photos of the children, and we realize that the greatest mystery isn't how Clara Miller returned, but how many others are still waiting for a door to open, for a light to shine, for someone to remember a name that hasn't been spoken in 40 years. The bell in Red Creek tolls one last time, a lonely, metallic sound that carries across the scrubland. It is a sound of closure for some, and a summons for others. The case is closed, but the shadow of the sun is long, and it is in that shadow that the truth continues to breathe, waiting for the next ghost to walk home.